you believe there are people inside the United States, inside the government, at high levels, that were involved in orchestrating 9/11?
Absolutely. I'm 100% sure.
You think your son was therefore murdered by Americans?
Absolutely.
9/11's an inside job. The government carried it out. Investigate it. They're using it to take your freedoms, just like Hitler firebombed his own Reichstag. We have the official government U.S. documents where they plan to carry out 9/11. Operation Northwoods.
Even Lee Hamilton, the co-chair of the 9/11 Commission itself, admits to us that the process he headed up was seriously flawed.
So there are all kinds of reasons. We thought we were set up to fail. We got started late. We had a very short time frame. Indeed, we had to get it extended. We did not have enough money. They were afraid we were going to hang somebody, that we would point the finger at.
Is one of the reasons why these guys aren't getting funded and it's so late is that someone's got something to hide?
There is, well, a lot of people have things to hide.
Who in this case?
Well, look, you can go down the list and probably identify 100 people.
Do you believe that the government had anything to do with the attack of 9/11? Do you believe in a conspiracy in terms of the attack of 9/11?
No, but I do believe that it is the first time in history that fire has ever melted steel. I do believe that it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved. World Trade Center 7. World Trader 1 and 2 got hit by planes. 7, miraculously, the first time in history, steel was melted by fire.
You had some interesting comments. You were on a radio show and you talked about 9/11, and you have, is it a theory or you just don't believe the government account of what happened on 9/11?
I just had questions.
Yeah?
I had a lot of questions. And the forum I chose to voice those questions in is the Alex Jones radio show.
Mm-hmm.
And just because he's a guy that I've been a fan of and followed for a lot of years. And, you know, I got attacked. I mean, there were a lot of hit pieces. The reaction was
Yeah, people get very mad when celebrities have opinions.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I know he's not qualified. He doesn't, you know, he's just, who the hell is he to have an opinion about something so horrible? And, you know, it was sad because they didn't really take a look at any of the stuff I was asking them to look at, any of the evidence or any of the stuff that generated those questions, you know? And they said, oh, he's another tinfoil hat wearing Hollywood clown, you know? And it's like the only, you know, I felt that the only real validation I needed was just being a tax-paying American that loves my country.
All right, Wolf, there are indications we may not have been told the truth about what happened on September 11th, 2001.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident.
Now, wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th.
Have a sense, if we imagine the kind of world we would face if the people who bombed the Best Hall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, attacked.
Them people, law enforcement, would be on calling that. Were here and they were shaking in their shoes. They were physically shaking, scared to death because certain people said, I'm a radical, I'm a wild man, I got a gun under every arm, you say anything to me, I'll shoot you. If the people find out how they've been ripped off and enslaved, they will revolt. There'll be blood running in the streets.
This is the place where it pops up, rushing the building, Paramilitary death squads murder your children. Empty shell of a man, licking shots in the air. Soldiers dying out there, but nobody cares. Fear for the future, but make note of the past. To be condemned, to live it again and get blast. Class warfare, kept out of the news. Replaced by corporations, political views. Cause this is where the guns are manufactured and sold. The land that was stolen, stripped of all of its gold. Old timers on the deathbed, speaking of wisdom. Immigrants crucified by conservative Christians. And we all got freedom to die in the street. But the difference is more of us die in a week than they die in a year. I made it clear where I stand when the line is drawn. But now the line is gone and nigga, anything goes. The land where the guns don't let anything grow. And what the fuck you niggas know about living in hell? You're not built like me, you never lived in a cell. You never gambled with your soul, fuck the ice in your hand. Gun in your palm, but you got a nigga's life in your hand. Young man, just remember that slice in a gram is a bloody game, like throwing rice in a fan. My words flow like the rivers that's west of Iran. The fertile crescent moon with the star in the middle. I reveal the depth of history, scars when I scribble. I gave you the world and I ain't even charge you a little. The martyr is crippled, the prophets are dead and buried, but the message is simple, and it's not written down in holy books as a riddle. Now we running through the streets, starving on that guerrilla warfare. My people stuck in a guerrilla warfare. Innocent children screaming in tears. You acting like the army ain't brought hell here. Military industry having a swell year, swinging again and lying in heaven, living off a blank check after 9/11. But I'ma have the truth brought back to the source. Fight for my land with physical force. Speak through music, the subliminal course. I need the tech and the clip, fuck a chain in the Porsche. Land of the gun, land of the gun, land of the gun, land of the gun. Yeah, yeah, immortal technique. Harlem, hello.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
From 1945 and the end of the war through 1989 and the end of the Cold War, we had a worldview. Republican and Democratic presidents alike, from Harry Truman to George Bush, stood for freedom and stood for certain propositions that would make America strong and healthy and grow the middle class and shrink poverty and stand against communism. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Last winter, the FBI was praised for its speed in cracking the case of the World Trade Center bombing and bringing 4 suspects to trial. Now, there is some evidence that the FBI may have known of the plot in advance through an informant and might even have stopped the bombing that killed 6 people. Correspondent Jacqueline Adams has the story.
FBI agents might have been able to prevent last February's deadly explosion at New York's World Trade Center. They discussed secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives, but they didn't, according to the FBI's own informant, Imad Salem. Unbeknownst to the FBI at the time, Salem recorded many of his conversations with his handlers.
I'm holding 903 pages of draft transcripts.
William Kunstler represents Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman and several others charged with conspiring to blow up a series of New York City landmarks 4 months after the World Trade Center bombing. That case has not yet gone to trial. Kunstler confirmed newspaper reports of the Salem transcripts. In one, Salem complains to an FBI agent, "Since the bomb went off, I feel terrible. I feel bad. I feel here is people who don't listen." The agent replies, "Hey, I mean, it wasn't like you didn't try and I didn't try. You can't force people to do the right thing."
There is material in here to show gross governmental misconduct.
Today, attorneys for the defendants in the ongoing World Trade Center bombing case formally asked for the transcripts of Salem's tapes.
Quite frankly, beyond me, why now, the 4th week into the trial, We still don't have these materials.
Prosecutors have refused to comment publicly, but legal experts say the defense may have no right to those transcripts.
It's not a defense to a crime to say, if only the government had stopped me, I wouldn't have done it. So this isn't material that ordinarily the defense would be entitled to.
So what's your job?
What was that?
What's your job?
Oh, parts clerk.
Oh, you just parking this one, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Wherever somebody's struggling for a place to stand, for a decent job or a helping hand, wherever somebody's struggling to be free, look in your eyes, you don't see me, you don't see me, you don't see me, you don't see me, you don't see me.
What they would use to, if the report that we gave you just a few moments ago turns out to be correct, that they have found a second explosive device of some kind inside this building, they'll back that trailer down there, and the bomb squad folks will go in, and they will use that trailer. You see the bucket on the back there, sort of, this is how they would transport the explosive device away from this populated area to try to do something with it.
Confirmed through federal authorities that a second bomb has been found inside that federal building in Oklahoma City. It was an explosion at 9 o'clock this morning that did that damage you're looking at right there, blowing off the entire north face of that building. Again, you're looking at the north face there. A second bomb was found on the east side of that building. A bomb squad is on the scene. That second bomb has not exploded. We don't know quite the status yet, if they've managed to defuse it, but it has been confirmed that a second bomb was found on the east side of that building.
I just took a look down the street at the Morrow building again. I see another bomb truck going, so apparently they're going to try to get out that third bomb that's been talked about. Still a lot of activity around the Morrow building. Security concerns that another one still might go off. That's what everybody's worried about.
At the present time, the medical teams downtown are unable to get into the wreckage to retrieve more of the injured because of the presence of other bombs in the area. I've been told by the police department that just as soon as those bombs are defused, they will permit the medical teams to enter.
Just for a second, we want to update our audience that the Justice Department is reporting that a second explosive device has been found in the A.P. Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City. Mike, you're still with us, aren't you?
Yes, I am, and I might tell you in addition to that, that in fact what we were told at the scene a few minutes ago was that in fact 2 different explosive devices were found in addition to the one that went off.
So a total of 3.
A total of 3, and of course then there was mass confusion whenever there were hundreds of spectators in the area, and when they heard that there were other bombs in the building, people were running from the area in the opposite direction as fast as they could.
Utter devastation that one explosion caused, because here's now what we are starting to learn about the succession, or what someone obviously hoped would be a succession of explosions. The first bomb that was in the federal building did go off. It did the damage that you see right there. The second explosive was found and diffused. The third explosive that was found, and they are working on right now as we speak, I understand, both the second and third explosives, if you can imagine this, were larger than the first. So try to imagine two- or threefold happening what we've already seen there. It is just incredible to think that there was that much heavy artillery that was somehow moved into the downtown Oklahoma City.
President Clinton just called Governor Frank Keating, and he says that 3 FBI anti-terrorist teams are en route to Oklahoma City. Right now, they are saying that this is the work of a sophisticated group. This is a very sophisticated device, and it has to have been done by an explosives expert. Obviously,
you talk about the second bomb that was found. Devin told us earlier, we got information that the second and third bomb were bigger than the one that was detonated. 1,200 pounds of explosives in that first one that went off. The second and third devices that were found were actually larger than that. So you can undetonated bombs that were found that were bigger than the device that exploded. And if this other one that they're looking at now turns out to be something, it appears that it was meant for this building to come down, to be leveled, because of the amount of power that could have gone off. Only one explosion, it was obviously tragic enough, but there were more bombs set to go off, according to ATF officials. The question is, why that building? And was it Waco? Is it Nation of Islam? We should find out an awful lot when the bombs are taken apart. I think it was a great stroke of luck. As you're mentioning, it's hard to talk about luck on a day like today in Oklahoma City, but it was a great stroke of luck that we actually have got diffused bombs. It's there.
In the building, and I looked out the window, and I seen a dealer's truck, and I seen the man get out of the dealer's truck.
She was just 10 feet away from the man depicted in this sketch when he stepped out of the Ryder truck.
He was olive complexion, and he had black curly hair. He was wearing the baseball cap, but his curls were sticking out of his head. It was short in the back, but you could still see the curls in his hair. He was not American. He was foreign. You can tell by his skin, his face, the way his face was.
We asked FBI Dan Vogel if John Doe number 2 is still part of the investigation. Does he exist? The answer, yes. The FBI is still trying to locate and identify John Doe number 2. The man in our reports is Iraqi. Today the FBI says they are not pursuing a Middle Eastern connection. This doesn't mean it has been ruled out. That could change tomorrow.
Because I sat there and I seen McVeigh was with another person.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that there was a passenger in the Ryder truck?
That's even more. I have no doubt there was definitely a second person, no matter what. There was 2 people in this vehicle.
John Doe number 2, and there was a $2 million price put on his head, and now they're saying there's no John Doe number 2.
And our witnesses picked out a photo lineup. The news channel shared the information and surveillance tapes of this man with the FBI. They've had some of that material long before our reports went on the air.
We'll also focus on surveillance cameras that caught the bombing on tape, and maybe the men behind the bombing. The news channel has new information tonight that there's a chance surveillance tapes could be the smoking gun evidence. Now, we asked candid questions in a rare face-to-face meeting with ATF officials close to the investigation. We learned that video collected from downtown businesses the morning of April 19th may someday be played before a jury. Officials won't say who or what exactly is on the tape. However, numerous sources have confirmed the tapes exist and that they reveal more than one bomber.
So what evidence are they asking for? They're asking for video taken from the Ryder truck from the Rigi Towers.
Well, Kevin, it's a question we've all been asking. We've been asking that question since we first broke the story that surveillance cameras aimed at the federal building could have captured all those involved on tape. Now, sources have confirmed those tapes exist and that they show more than one bomber. The FBI also confirmed those tapes exist when they refused to release them, claiming the video is part of a...
All right, Boston Center, Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
Who's the one with the most to gain? For 9/11, motherfuckers couldn't stand his name. Now even niggas waving flags like they lost their mind. Everybody got opinions, but don't know the time. Cause America's been took, it's plain to see. The oldest trick in the book is making enemy. A phony evil so the government can do its dirt and take away your freedom, lock and load, beat and search. Ain't nothing changed but more colored people locked in prison. These pigs still beat us, but it seems we forgetting. But I remember 4 September how these devils do it. Fuck Giuliani, ask Diallo how he doing. We in the streets, holler jail to the thief. Follow fuck waving flags, bring these dragons to their knees. Oil, blood, money, make these killers ride cold. Suspicious suicide, people dying never told. It's all a part of playing God, so you think we need them. While being cash crossed, take away your rights to freedom. Bear witness to the sickness of these dictators. Hope you understand the time, brother, cause it's major. Why my records always come the same. Keep it real, ain't no fillers, motherfucker blingin'. Mine eyes seen the gory of the coming of the beast. So every story, every word I'm saying, fuck peace. See, you could witness the Illuminati body count. Don't be surprised, these is devils that I'm talking about. You think a couple thousand lies mean shit to killers? Nigga, I swear to God, we the ones, ain't no villains. Or any other word they think to demonize a country. Ain't no terror threat unless approval rating slumping. So I'ma say it for the record, we the ones that planned it. Ain't no other country took a part or had their hand in. Just a way to keep you scary so you think you need them. Praising Bush while that killer take away your freedom. How many of us got discovered but ignore the symptoms? Niggas talking loud but ain't nobody saying shit. And with the 4th Amendment gone, eyes are on the 1st. That's why I'm spitting cyanide each and every verse. I see the Carlisle group in Harris bank accounts. I see them plead the 5th each and every session now. And while Reichstag burns, see the public buy it. I see the profiling, see the media's compliance. War's good for business, see the vicious make a savior. Hope you understand the time, brother, cause it's major.
What would you do if you knew all the things we knew? Would you stand up for truth? Or would you turn away
Bomb in the building, start clearing out.
Sorry, you said there's a bomb? What'd you say?
Bomb in the building, start clearing out.
Got it.
This is Tower 1. This is Tower 1. Put a big one
I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. Because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen. If someone can share it with him. 10-4. Thanks. They told me just to wait here at this semi-staging area. See if I can help, and that's what I'm doing. They won't let me go any closer. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on.
Okay.
Okay. We just heard another explosion. They're handing out gloves and masks. The consensus is it's too unsafe to go in there.
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
Supposed to be right now. You gotta get back from here.
Conditions 565 priority.
Conditions 5-7, go.
Who's involved in the secondary explosion at Tower 1K? I've got 5 patients. They need to be treated and transported. I have them in my command car. You have to direct me to the nearest treatment center.
7 Tom, proceed.
On Broadway and Warren Street with Captain Olszewski. She's told us that any ambulances south of Warren Street on Broadway or any other location on Warren Street because of the secondary explosion. We've got numerous people covered with dust from the secondary explosion.
Be advised, with during the explosion, I saw the Duke. Is she on the air?
What do you got up there, Steve?
I'm still in voice stairway, 74th floor. No smoke or fire problem. The walls are breached, so be careful.
Yeah, 10-4. I saw that on 68.
Flooding, come on over. Flooding, come on over by us. Guys, we got... We got 2 isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. Where you know that? 78th floor, numerous 1045 cold lines.
At 10:30, I tried to leave the building, but as soon as I got outside, I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandelier shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
Some of the people out, then there was secondary explosions, and then the subsequent collapses. So I don't know how many people were in there. I know there was a lot of firefighters.
New York's bravest never had a chance.
We really never even got that close to the building. An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
The FBI is here, as you can see. They had roped this area off. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
Most of the victims so far were people outside the blown-up buildings.
Like, it sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
To me, it sounded like an explosion. Then the building, the rolling sound sounded like the building collapsed. The floors collapsed down. I saw it blow, and then ran like hell. Thank God. I'm 69, but I can still run.
It just went ba-boom. It was like a bomb went off, and it was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, we were coming out on a mezzanine level there, and another explosion came right from it, because everyone flying.
We just saw that as well. The second tower, the only one that was standing, tower number 1. Just we saw some kind of explosion, a lot of smoke come out at the top of the tower, and then it collapsed down onto the street.
Next thing we know, it was boom, boom, and the floor started shaking. And then we saw debris fall down, and next thing we know, we had to get out of the building. We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, there was this big explosion.
Well, me and Mr. Hesh, the Corporation Counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer who was questioning me about my press credentials, we heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse.
Rose Housey, one of our CNN producers, is on the phone. Rose, what do you got?
I'm about a block away, and there were several people that were hanging out the windows right below where the plane crashed, when suddenly you saw the top of the building start to shake, and people began leaping from the windows in the north side of the building. You saw 2 people at first plummet, and then a third one, and then the entire top of the building just blew up, and splinters of debris are falling on the street.
When I tried to save people, in the moment we heard a big explosion coming down. Everything just went black. Everything came down, glass started popping, and people got hurt. Stuff went on top of them, and it was a big explosion, and everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me, oh, this is not snow, this is all from the building. It was a terrible nightmare.
Because I was down in the basement, all of a sudden we heard a loud bang, and the elevator doors blew open. Some guy was burnt up, so I dragged him out. His skin was all hanging off.
The streets of the financial district covered with debris, in some cases ankle deep. Cars on fire, cars just turned by the force of the explosions.
Dave, let's take a look now at more of the chaos, the confusion, the sights and sounds in New York, in Manhattan this morning when the tragedy struck.
Corner of the 82nd floor. I heard a noise like a sonic boom almost, and then a blast. The building swayed, shook a little bit. I saw papers coming fly out of the middle of the building, and then we went to the staircase to try to get down. We were going down. We got stuck on one floor because the door and the staircase wouldn't even open. So we went back onto the floor through some fire. We saw some fire and rubbish, and we went to the other staircase to come down. We made it all the way downstairs. And then when we were just about to come out of the building, there was another blast, and all the lights went out, and this is what happened then.
The glass came down?
We didn't see we were still inside the building. All we heard was a big blast, and the whole volume of air moved. And we came out through the subway.
Well, good to see you. What are your injuries? Have they told you?
The only thing I have is I have a little cut on my hand. That's about it. So I was real lucky. I don't know what happened to the people behind me when that blast occurred.
There was another big explosion in the other tower. Flames coming out in this billowing grey smoke. People still not panicking. People not quite understanding what was going on. Then somebody said that they saw an airliner going to one of those towers. Then, I don't know, an hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much lower. I don't know what on earth caused.
commercial airliners flown into those two buildings, and they came down. We presume because of the initial explosion, there may have been secondary explosions as well that were detonated in the building by these terrorists. Robert Harper.
The chief of safety of the fire department of New York City, that shortly after 9 o'clock, he had roughly 10 alarms, roughly 200 men in the building trying to effect rescues of some of those civilians who were in there, and that basically he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And then an hour after the first hit here, with the first crash that took place, he said, there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. One of the secondary devices he thinks that took place after the initial impact he thinks may have been on the plane that crashed into one of the towers. The second device he speculates, was probably planted in the building. So that's what we have been told by Albert Turry, who is the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. He told me that just moments ago. But the bottom line is that according to the chief of safety of the New York City Fire Department, he says that he probably lost a great many men in those secondary explosions, and he said that there were literally hundreds, if not thousands of people in those two towers when the explosions took place.
Rick Sanchez has been there throughout this morning for us. Rick, tell us where you are and what the latest is.
Well, I'm in that area, if you're familiar with this area, of where West Broadway and Hudson come together, right at Chambers. That would put us about a block and a half away from the site of where the explosion was. That area has just been evacuated because police have found what they describe as a suspicious device, and they fear that it might be something that could lead to another explosion. Obviously, there's a real sense of caution here on the part of police. I spoke with some police officials moments ago, Chris, and they told me that they have reason to believe that one of the explosions at the World Trade Center, aside from the ones that may have been caused by the impact of the plane with the building, may have been caused by a van that was parked in the building that may have had some type of explosive device in it. So their fear is that there may have been explosive device planted either in the building or in the adjacent area, and that's why they're being so cautious.
Joining me is Jack Kelly. Now, he is a foreign correspondent, war correspondent, and just came back from Israel. He has some information about these attacks. Jack, what can you tell us happened first in New York?
Apparently what appears to happen was that at the same time two planes hit the building, that the FBI most likely thinks that there was a car or truck packed with explosives underneath the buildings, which also exploded at the same time and brought both of them down.
William Rodriguez is my name. I work in the building for 20 years. 20 years of my life I was a janitor. I was the person in charge of cleaning all the stairwells of the North Tower. I came in late, 8:30 in the morning. I'm on the basement. The building has 6 sub-levels of basement. B1, B2, B3, all the way down to B6. 6 sub-levels. Our office was on the B1 level. As I was talking to a supervisor, at 8:46, we're like chit-chatting, and all of a sudden we hear, boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. Upwards. Now, 20 years in the building. Remember that. And it came from the basement, between the B2 level and the B3 level. And at that moment, I thought it was the mechanical room, where they have all the pumps and the generators for the building, that maybe a generator just blew up on the basement. Now, 20 years in the building, you know something that comes from the bottom and something that comes from the top. At that moment, everybody started screaming. And the explosion was so hard that all the walls cracked, the false ceiling fell on top of us, the sprinkler system got activated, and when I went to verbalize that it was a generator, we hear, boom, all the way on the top, the impact of the plane on the top. 2 different events, 2 different times. Later on, I thought that they probably didn't synchronize it well.
The initial FEMA report basically acknowledged that the kerosene would have burned off very quickly. What wasn't destroyed in the initial fireball would have been consumed fairly rapidly and would have only really served as an ignition for the rest of the material. And the second point being that the fuel here really was strictly office contents. If you think of a modern office with copying machines, computers, and as has been previously mentioned, the smoke, particularly from Building 2, just before it collapsed, was very black looking. This is generally an indication of an inefficient fire in which there's not enough oxygen for the amount of fuel. These types of fires typically burn very cool. They are not hot flames like blowtorches. The cores themselves, basically, if you've seen diagrams of the building, there's a large central rectangle in each of the towers that contained 47 columns. And these columns basically were the primary structural support of the building. They were given the role of supporting the whole gravitational load of the building. Since they were so strong, it would have been reasonable to think that they would have withstood, at least to some extent, the collapse. But in fact, as we see after the buildings collapsed, there was basically only little stubs of these things standing up a floor or two above the ground level. The cores did not have much in them that would burn. The cores basically were dedicated to things like elevator shafts, utility shafts, stairways. So you have drywall material, you have a little bit of carpeting, you don't really have any inflammable material in the core itself. The core was specifically designed so it could not function as a chimney. They did not want, in the case of a fire, for the fire to be able to travel through the elevators or for air to come in through the elevators. So they were designed with what this architect, Aaron Swirsky, I believe it was, referred to as a hermetically sealed system. There were fire shutters that were designed to close off the core in the event of an event like this. And those, as far as we know, functioned properly, which means that there was a very limited amount of oxygen available. Okay, as far as the issue of what failed and how, some of the initial suggestions, and these showed up in the NOVA documentary, which is a good example of what I like to call proof by computer animation. Thomas Egar, who was a material scientist but not a structural engineer, who became a spokesman for these documentaries, indicated that the floors had somehow failed, that the trusses supporting the floors had failed. This was the theory that was put forward actually in the initial FEMA report. Subsequently, there have been basically complete contradictions of that. Jim Hoffman has done quite a bit of research which is available on the web concerning the problems with this idea that the floors would have simply fallen. There was a study done by Weidlinger Associates. The chief engineer there was Mathis Levy, who's a very well-known authority on building collapses. He specifically disavowed the idea of pancaking or collapsing of the floors. And the most recent official report we have on this, which is from the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, rejected the idea that floor collapse was part of it. And so as a result, we have basically no sequential model at this point. What NIST has suggested is that there was some kind of simultaneous collapse of the cores, but they have not attempted to give any kind of modeling as to whether those cores could have in fact been destroyed by the fires in the way that they claim.
There have been some metallurgy tests done by Frank Gale. He was a member of the NIST team. He was the leader of Project 4 out of 8 projects, which was a study of the metallurgy, was the analysis of the steel. These tests that have been done on the steel samples, the few steel samples that have been saved, one of them was a paint deformation test that Frank Gale's group had done, and it showed how paint would curl or change in a certain temperature range. And so they took these samples and they analyzed them to see what temperatures they might have been exposed to by looking at the paint. Less than 2% of these samples, which had been pulled specifically from the fire zones, and they even said despite pre-collapse exposure to fire, less than 2% of them had seen temperatures of 480 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very low relative to the temperatures needed to soften or melt steel. problem with floors not collapsing was a big one, because that's really where all the experts were hanging their hat on, this pancake theory in the furnaces. You know, they all passed the test for 2 hours. 2 hours, of course, is longer than either of the buildings stood. That was a red flag for me, right? And then I was even more interested in reading this report.
Firefighter Richard Benasiskis, speaking of the South Tower, said there was just an explosion. It seemed like on television when they blow up these buildings. It seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt, all these explosions. Deputy Commissioner Thomas Fitzpatrick said it looked like sparkling around one specific layer of the building. My initial reaction was that this was exactly the way it looks when they show you these implosions on TV. A few witnesses spoke of horizontal ejections. Chief Frank Crothers said there was what appeared to be an explosion. It appeared at the very top, simultaneously from all four sides. Material shot out horizontally, and then there seemed to be a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. This testimony is very important because the official theory says that the horizontal ejections were produced when the floors collapsed and pushed the materials out. So listen to firefighter James Curran, who said, I looked back and I heard like every floor went choo choo choo. I looked back and from the pressure everything was getting blown out of the floors before it actually collapsed. If all these firefighters and medical workers witnessed all these phenomena suggestive of controlled demolition, it might be wondered why they have not spoken out. Part of the answer is probably provided by Auxiliary Lieutenant Fireman Paul Isaac, having said that there were definitely bombs in those buildings. Isaac added that many other firemen know there were bombs in the buildings, but they're afraid for their jobs to admit it because the higher-ups forbid discussion of this fact. Isaac, for example, has more recently said, I know 9/11 was an inside job. The police know it's an inside job. And the firemen know it too. But you have not heard this on the nightly news.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
The day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America.
This is a live picture. We're just getting here. This is the firefighters battling the blaze at the Pentagon. Look.
So you can see the damage.
This is just going to be raw tape that Dave Statter and his crew are
just feeding into us.
You can see this apparent terrorist attack. A jet slammed into the Pentagon about 15-20 minutes ago, the helipad side on 395. We have no word yet on casualties.
9:45 a.m. 9:45 a.m.
Let's go back to Dave, who is at the Pentagon site.
Hey, I just heard another explosion of some sort. Now, it could be a secondary explosion here from something happening, but we just heard a loud pop just as you were coming to me. It seemed to be on the east of here. I can't tell what it is. It might be something that's secondary to this because we had a number of small explosions after the fire occurred.
But from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual side of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around.
Yo, you told the soldiers fight for God, got them slaughtering kids. Now they sick, taking naked flicks at Abu Ghraib. This is a step back, not evolution for the torturer. Fight for resolution, revolution through an orchestra. There's more to the regime change than democracy. Hypocrisy, so the elite can keep their monopoly. Why so few control so much of the wealth? How you gonna stop corporate criminals? You are in yourself. In business with the Bin Ladens, rich off of Enron. Iraq building contracts, the Cheney is dead wrong. And Rumsfeld don't even know how a gun's held. Let him fight his own battle, faggot wouldn't shoot one shell. But they'll recruit high schools for young kids. Give them guns with lasers, make them run up in some crib. Take a hostage, no rights in Guantanamo. We onto those snakes, make them fall like dominoes. Cause now they talking about delaying the election. Scare us with terror alerts and say it's for protection. Won't let the UN count the votes, afraid cause we are destined to take away their power, break away from their oppression. Tell these faces we ain't with that segregation. We want mind elevation, healthcare legislation, worldwide medication. Answers why they not interrogating Bin Laden's family, just taking them back to the Saudis while they hit us with the Patriot Act. We want proof, where's your truth? Start facing the facts. Where's the bombs that Saddam used to make in Iraq? You either stupid or a liar, start facing the fact that you have no God, you have no armor to defend your father who made this Osama. Been paid from Bin Laden, Saddam and the Taliban. Whose oil are you putting in your caravan? You have no God, you have no armor to defend your father who made this Osama. Been paid from Bin Laden, Saddam and the Taliban. Whose oil are you putting in your caravan?
You know that I'm the type to fight, I'm willing to brawl. If it still isn't right, we can kill them all. We can
go to war with all these motherfuckers in the sand. We can take it to the Saudis, now we make them understand what the working class jerking that M60. But if I'm going out, fuck, I'm taking them with me. And tell me which lies are the generated push lies from the Reagan administration right down into these Bush guys. Manipulate the media, make it like you switch sides. Economics trickle down, greedy of rich guys. A tickle pink and it's sick to think while we eating chicken wings, thinking how to stick the brink. Sick of things are happening inside of my head. We can't get Osama now, so here's Saddam instead. Sandy battlefields are bloody and they rotting in red, while Al-Qaeda got a camera and they chopping our heads. And this is your America, mine has never been oil. Mr. Bush, no, we never made the president royal. Put your crown on that ground, the same ground that gave you your dollars and pounds, rubles and your yens. And look what you created, sir, cause truly you are them. There's a 911 America, the president is them. With his hand on the Bible, watch a devil in his sin. When his blood spills, know that he was never innocent.
No, you have no God, you have no honor to defend your father who made this Osama. Been paid for Bin Laden, Saddam and the Taliban. Whose oil are you putting in your caravan? You have no God, you have no honor to defend your father who made this Osama. Been paid for Bin Laden, Saddam and the Taliban. Yeah. Whose oil are you putting in your caravan? Let me explain why my heart is in pain. You trade lies for loot and claim fair market exchange. When my main from the block hit the Marines at 17, exposed his soul to horrible killing he's never seen. Lost more than 50 pounds, trekking across the desert ground. Afghanistan, he's soon to hit Iraq with heavy weapon rounds. Yo, E, rep your town, cause the beam got your back. I'm just heated at the current regime scheme of attack. The president dodged drafts, drive drunk and sniff cane. Claim Clinton should have been impeached for dicking chicks' brains. They think it's sane and it's claimed that the priorities stealing Florida by blocking votes from minorities. One police, state authority, Nazi mind control conformity. World war like when we stormed Normandy. Cheney's the brainies, Dr. Evil with a broke heart. Bush Senior runs the country, Junior couldn't run a go-kart. They start wars, use attacks to buy their bombs. They're crazy rich from alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And Bin Laden ain't gon' never get handled, man. Only wanted to build a pipeline through Afghanistan. Osama's father laundered more cash. Every time we pour gas, we'll ghetto you catch bullets and they pour ass. How can we compete when their base is the elite? Well, I guess our only option is to take it to the streets. The last thing we wanted is to reach a civil war. If our ass ain't living free, then what are we living for? The last thing we wanted was to start a civil war. But if our ass ain't living free, what the fuck are we living for? No, you have no God, you have no honor to defend your father who made this Osama. Been paid for Bin Laden, Saddam and the Taliban. Whose oil are you putting in your caravan? You have no God, you have no honor to defend your father who made this Osama.
On the left, we have the NTSB animation, and on the right, the 9/11 Commission Report animation. Let's see if they match. As it comes up to the Navy Annex, it appears they conflict. One is north, one is south. Let's continue. There's a Citgo gas station. The NTSB report has it on the north side, the 9/11 Commission report on the south side. According to the official report, the aircraft that struck the Pentagon also struck down light poles. There's pole number 1. Pole number 2. There's pole 3. Pole number 4. And there's pole 5. And if we compare that to the animation provided by the NTSB, poles 1 and 2, poles 3 and 4, and there's pole 5 with a flight path to the left and too high.
That's the Pentagon. Okay, pretty close view of where the impact point was. Now, Robert, when you ran up to the mound, you saw the plane fly through between these two trees. What happened after that?
It was so kind of quick, maybe 2 seconds when I saw just swoop down here, and I tried to follow it, and I saw it lift up a little bit to get over to the side of the bridge here.
To the side of the bridge?
Yes, where you see the do not enter sign. Seems to be that way.
Okay, so you're talking about the do not enter sign. Oh, I see. Okay, he's talking about do not enter sign right there.
It's on the billboard.
Right there. So it flew up to go over that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then my view was, I could not totally see when it hit the Pentagon. All I saw was it headed straight to it, and then the big explosion, just a fireball and lots of smoke.
Okay. Did you see it? So you didn't see it hit the Pentagon?
No, the view is not as. It was obstructed still. I could only see the fireball from the explosion.
Did you see it hit any light posts?
No, I may have missed that. I just saw it pick up, just to make.
You saw it pick up to miss that. All right. Now, I gave you this piece of paper yesterday to draw a flight path on. That's your drawing, correct?
Yes. Well, that's correct.
Okay, I want you to show that to the camera too. This is the drawing you made of the flight path. Well, first I wanted to ask you, what side of the station did you see the plane fly over?
Okay, actually from the front of the station. Exactly where we were at earlier, where the yellow Jersey barrier.
Okay, was it more on the, when we're facing the station, more on the north side or to the left?
No, it was more to the left.
More to the left, okay. We're on the north side of the Sitco station right now. Sergeant Legassi, can you please just explain to me what you saw on 9/11?
Sure. Basically, I was here to refuel my vehicle. Had my door open.
You were standing in that area right there?
Well, I was actually standing here.
Okay. Now that I know that, why don't you come around here to the front of the car so I can see you better and hear you better. Where did you see the plane coming from exactly? What direction? Did you see it approaching?
Well, I saw it, like I said, if you look here where Arlington Cemetery is, right about where those transformers are, that's the first place I saw it, because it was below, I was there, so a little bit different angle, but it was still below the roof line, so that would have been below 100 feet AGL. So, cleared all these lampposts, cleared all the light posts.
So it was heading towards you, coming from Arlington Cemetery, over there?
No. It was heading from left to right. It came from FOB2 area.
So you're saying it was, it came from to the north side of the Navy Annex, even?
Yes. Now, what it did before those transformers, I don't know, because that's the first place I really saw it, was right there. But it was not coming towards me. It was coming from left to right, or from east, or from west to east, heading into the building that way. So what it did before that point, who knows? I didn't see it. But from here down, I knew exactly what it did. And as you notice, something else, because I've spent a little bit of time on those websites, there's some eyewitnesses on 27 that were on the north end of 27. Well, you can see here, there's a row of trees. It's going to block the view of the aircraft from anybody that was on 27 that's heading southbound. So why there's so many of those witnesses making statements that are being validated, I have no idea.
One of the other things that's talked about on the internet is the fact that I witnessed it, as did a number of other people from USA Today. And one of the things I've seen written is, oh, well, what was going on? Were all the USA Today people gathering for a picnic at the Pentagon? You should probably know that the Pentagon at the time was located about 9 minutes away from USA Today's headquarters in Roslyn. It's since moved out to Tyson's Corner, but at the time, it was the way that we all went to work each day. We drove by the Pentagon. So it was a common sight for us. One of the things that really bothers me is the fact that people constantly are calling me and emailing me and want information about this, and I'm happy to talk to them. But a lot of them say that, well, you know, physics just says that this is impossible what happened. But what happened is pretty obvious. The force of this jet hitting the Pentagon at about 500 miles an hour, when something hits a concrete structure like that, you know, this belief that the wings would go in is just ridiculous. What I saw was the actual jet going in, but the wings folded back like this. So that's why when you look at the hole, you say, well, it's not big enough. Well, that's why. The wings were not strong enough to withstand the impact. They folded back, and that's why the jet went in, and that's why the hole that you see isn't as large as you might imagine in another structure. And I figure if you're going to the internet for information, go and find the right information.
Shadowing the plane.
Didn't see it.
You didn't see any other
Never
plane?
saw it. I mean, obviously I know it was in the area because I've read enough reports. I never saw it.
Okay. Okay, I forgot to get you to draw where you saw the flight path coming, Sergeant Lagasse.
From out of here.
Uh-huh. Okay, yeah, make that nice and thick for me.
And obviously it's the wrong angle, but it kind of...
Yeah, that's how you saw it. Okay, Sergeant Brooks is going to draw for me on the image where he saw the plane fly. Now he's trying to assess the area again and recollect the way he saw it, and then draw it right on that piece of paper for me. Keep looking.
Step out a little bit, Craig, so I can...
Okay, absolutely. He's going over here to the north side from where he remembers it flying. I want to get you actually drawing it if I could. No pressure, no pressure. All right, make that nice and thick for me.
Want it thicker there?
Yeah, sure. I think that's pretty close.
That's damn near perfect from what I saw. And we've never, for the record,
we've
never talked to each other about this.
at all.
One of my experiences in the Army was being in charge of the Army's
imagery interpretation for scientific and technical intelligence during the Cold War. I measured pieces of Soviet equipment from photographs. It was my job. I look at the hole in the Pentagon, and I look at the size of an airplane that was supposed to have hit the Pentagon, and I said, the plane does not fit in that hole. So what did hit the Pentagon?
What's wrong, Mommy? People are upset about some things, darling. Why are they yelling? They want attention. They're trying to get attention so that people will listen to them.
This is our way of trying to get some media attention because they are ignoring us, they're ignoring the anti-war movement, they're ignoring the anti-government movement. We love our country, but we cannot trust our government anymore. Our government is totally out of control. George Bush is full of shit. And who do you believe? Do you believe George Bush or do you believe me? That's what it's coming down to. Do you believe your neighbors? Do you believe the people that live in your hometown? Or do you believe these mad dog killers in Washington, D.C.?
Are we setting up a situation where young people who are just starting to come of age are going to have no choice but to either join the military where there seems to be a lot of money or to go to jail where there seems to be a lot of money? Is that what this is lining up to be?
When we stand here today, it is not enough to simply be for peace. We have to be for social justice. The fact is that right now, even as we are talking, people are being murdered by U.S. imperialism throughout the Middle East and throughout the world.
Our sons and our daughters are out there being used as cannon fodder. It's an outrage, and we should stand up and seize the hour and fight back.
If there is going to be any peace on earth, it is going to come as a consequence of our people uniting to defeat U.S. imperialism once and for all.
Easily I approach the microphone in this land of jokes. Can't leave it alone, cause you know I can see right through corrupt plans in these bullshit scams and untruths. We living in a maze, different days and times. The world is a stage, most truth is a lie. In this propaganda matrix, the sheep just die. For these murderous conservatives with corporate ties, deny knowledge of the truth, ignoring the poor. They just human ammunition for these capital wars. Just human ammunition and collateral deep. That's why millions of us holler rising up in the streets. And when you see me, understand I'm representing a voice the majority would feel if ever given a choice. I don't need the CD media, they only annoy. Cause the only ones that wanna scrap ain't ever deployed. Who do the fighting for these rich white folks and they wars? No, it ain't Drew Carey, Dennis Miller or Starr, Fox News, Mike Savage, Bruce Willis or Rush. Won't be MSNBC, CNN or a Bush. Never Toby Keith, Hannity, O'Reilly or Clint. Ain't Clear Channel, no they ain't supporting dissent. Never Blair, Kid Rock or Tom Cruise or Viles or James Woods, Rob Lowe, Tom Selleck or Powell. Not Arnold Schwarzenegger, he ain't gon' shoot a Ted Nugent, cause in war targets got weapons too. Ain't Cheney, Rumsfeld, Halliburton or Ridge, or Ann Coulter or Joseph Lieberman or the rich, or any bitch up in Congress. They just make laws. When it come to fighting, we the ones that end up in gauze. So when you say support that murderer, I have no applause. Even if he got his jumpsuit on, we pay the cost.
At any point during this day, were you just, in a very base way, afraid?
There were many times, Miles, that you were afraid. You were worried, especially when I was standing in front of the Pentagon that night, seeing one of our fortresses pried open by a missile airplane.
Pennsylvania, we don't know if it's a big plane, a small plane, any relation to this.
Plane down in Pennsylvania. Somerset County? Somerset County, right. Yeah, get that map made.
Another plane has crashed, this one about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh.
These are the first pictures we have in. This is from Somerset County,
Pennsylvania. This is where the United Airlines Flight 93, this was a Boeing 757 bound from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. It crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, near the town of Shanksville.
Crash investigators inspect a 20-foot crater in a rural cornfield in Somerset County. The point of impact for one of 4 commercial airliners today hijacked by terrorists.
I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire. Just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
MSNBC's Edie Magnus is in Pennsylvania now, about 80 miles from Pittsburgh, where one of those planes went into the ground today. It did not hit a target of any kind, and she has the latest for us now. Edie?
Tom, I'm on a country road that goes between the towns of Lambertsville and Shanksville in Pennsylvania, and beyond all of these lights you see, the glare of the media satellite trucks, it is a very dark night here in the country, but it is very busy. About a half a mile to a mile or so beyond, just over my shoulder, sort of where you see all those trucks headed down in an open field of an old strip mine, is where lies the wreckage of United Flight 93, which of course, as you all have been reporting, took off from Newark, destined for San Francisco, never got there. 38 passengers, 7 crew, no survivors. The debris here is spread over a 3 to 4 mile radius, which has now been completely sealed off and is being treated, according to the FBI, as a crime scene. Governor Tom Ridge made some remarks earlier at a press conference. He had flown over the site. He said the emergency response here was immediate. He also said, and I don't know whether or not you all are able to see pictures of this, but this is one of those cases where the pictures really do tell the story, that sort of the most horrifying aspect of this particular crash scene is how little debris is visible. There is a large crater in the ground, and I'm hoping that you all are seeing it as I'm talking about it, but that's really all you see is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris. There has been at least one report that the investigators out there, and there are hundreds of them, as I said tonight, have found nothing larger than a phone book.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is a very clearly just a typical central Pennsylvania country road. Now you're saying as you came up the road, why don't you explain to us?
Okay, I was coming up here and there's a stop sign, so I was slowing down to stop at the stop sign.
You were
okay, so I'm coming up here almost to the stop sign, and this, I keep calling it a plane for lack of any other, it came down. I mean, it was like right right above my van, and it went right down over my windshield because it was so low that I ducked in my van. And when I did, I shut off my radio. And that's when I knew there was no sound. And I said it out loud. I said it 2 times. Oh my God, it's going to crash. It's going to crash. It cleared those trees. So it, to my knowledge, it just seems to me it had to be below the power lines. Came in, swooped up, cleared those trees. It was fall, so it was full of leaves. No leaves moved on the trees. Nothing fell, because I kept thinking, you know, there should be like a disturbance, and it just smoothly went around. I went right over there, banked to the right, and crashed. Now you can't see where it crashed because you can't see through the trees, but I saw I heard the, well, I didn't hear the explosion that day. I don't know why. It was like about 2 days later before I, you know, but
You seem a little shaken up.
It does. It really upsets me.
What upsets you?
That it was such a horrible day. It was terrible. I thought we were going to die. And then I ran to this house and nobody was home. Because I didn't have my cell phone with me. So I got back in my car and I drove down to the next trailer. And I jumped out and I said, you got to call 911. And the woman on the trailer kept coming out and saying, did you see what happened in New York? Did you see what happened in the Pentagon? And I said, you don't understand, a plane just crashed. You don't understand. And they just kept telling me what had happened. And then I just, you know, I heard the sirens, so I knew 911 had been called, so I just went on home to make sure my family was okay.
What you saw?
It was pure white. There was not any markings on it. There was no, there was no rivets. I mean, it was that close that I could have seen it. It was so molded, it looked like it was all one piece. And it was cylinder, it came back, and then this spoiler was across it. And I remember the spoiler was so molded, and it was so white and shiny.
And there was no wings or...
I could not see any wings, because like I said, I saw it from mid-belly, and I'm looking up under it.
Let's have you do this. Let's have you turn this way, because the wind is blowing into the microphone. It's really loud. Okay, go ahead.
Well, like I said, I saw it from the mid-belly back, and then it banked, so I could not see like what would be like on top of it or anything. But it was just so perfectly white and not a mark on it. Because my thought at the time was, this looks like it's brand new. You know, like it never been used or.
And you think it was? What do you think it was?
I can only go by whatever other people have said to me. Because at the time I thought it was a plane. But with like the guy from California that emailed me a lot of pictures, the guy from Bedford that sent me a lot of pictures, they all said the same thing, that, you know, it had to be a missile or a unmanned plane or something. Just
open. On the other side of these trees, the official story is saying that it came from the west, correct? From this direction.
It came this direction. So it came this way. I'm here. They would have gone. Right. If there'd have been the two of them.
But yeah.
So it's clearly a discrepancy.
Did you see anything like this? No. Okay, this is that's the Falcon F-20. What that is that's the plane that they say in the official story was circling the area afterwards, taking photos. And you said afterwards you did see what, 2 planes? Mm-hmm. And they were
real high, and they were just like silver triangles in this white triangles.
Okay, so they
were real shiny.
They didn't look like this, though.
No.
See,
I mean, they were real high, but they just looked like those. I would call it a fighter jet, because that's.
At nearby Johnstown Airport, air traffic controllers got word just before the jetliner went down. They were told to evacuate the air traffic control tower.
We could not visually see the tower, or visually see the aircraft from the tower at 15 miles out, which is quite unusual for an aircraft that size.
It'll be there.
Yeah, we want to take our viewers live to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Our Brian Cabell is standing by. This, of course, is the site where United Airlines Flight 93 crashed on its way from Newark to San Francisco, crashed on Tuesday. And I understand in this investigation there's some breaking news. Brian, what can you tell us?
Well, Darren, in the last hour or so, the FBI and the state police here have confirmed that they have cordoned off a second area about 6 to 8 miles away from the crater here where this plane went down. This is apparently another debris site, which raises a number of questions. Why would debris from the plane, and they identified it specifically as being from this plane, why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely. Almost all the debris found at this site is within 100 yards, 200 yards away, so it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate, of course, but there were some cell phone callers.
If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up.
Protecting national secrets, the government goes deep underground, a virtually indestructible mine filled with files, patents, and secrets. It's the place Bill Gates chose to protect some priceless artifacts, and I got to see what few eyes have seen inside Iron Mountain. Drive an hour north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's rural, rolling pastures, lazy cows, not much to see, or so you think. There's security cameras all out here.
Yes.
Iron Mountain is one of the most protected places on Earth. The Yellow Gates guard an abandoned mine, 3 miles long and 2 miles wide, 220 feet underground, with vault after vault of historic treasures and government secrets. This is where the government keeps patents of countless inventions. The Social Security Administration is here. If you're a retired federal employee, your file is down here too. There's an endless maze of dark corridors that stretch into blackness. Vaults don't hold fancy jewelry or rare paintings. Vice President Chuck Dowdy tells me it needs to be worth a whole lot more. There are dark secrets in the mountain too. The charred evidence from United Flight 93 brought down by terrorists on 9/11 is heavily guarded in one of the underground vaults. It's no secret who their biggest client is.
The biggest client by number of employees would be sections of the federal government.
There are branches of the government I've never seen before, like the U.S. Investigation Services. But Dowdy is very tight-lipped about who does what and what's stored within these walls. Do you ask them, what do you want us to hold for you?
We do. And actually our customers are very forthright in telling us whether they want us to publicize their names or they don't want anybody to know their names.
95% of their customers demand complete secrecy, and guarding the information is Iron Mountain's greatest strength. Iron Mountain is like an underground city. They have their own water, their own sewage, their own fire department, and their own security team. And management tells me they have never, ever had a security breach.
Mr. Mayor, I got reports of a gas explosion related to this. Are you aware of that? There was a gas leak or possible explosion.
We don't believe it. We don't believe that's the case.
And we were in a building in which we were trapped for about 10-15 minutes.
Are you talking about did you go immediately to the Office of Emergency Management?
I went down to the scene and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of emergency management, and we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse.
Ma'am, I didn't know that the towers were going to collapse.
You reported
No.
You said on Peter Jennings on ABC
And
video,
also-
you indeed said that the towers, you were notified the towers were going to collapse while you were in some, not sure exactly where you were prior to, but you said on ABC video with Peter Jennings in an interview that you were aware that towers were going to collapse in advance. We'd like to know who told you the towers were going to collapse in advance, sir, and also we'd like to know who else you told.
Well, the fact is that I didn't realize the towers would collapse. I never realized that. If I can complete the sentence, if you give me the courtesy to complete the sentence, our understanding was that over a long period of time, the way other buildings collapse, the towers could collapse, meaning over a 7, 8, 9, 10-hour period. it occurred to all of us that they would ultimately collapse over the way buildings usually collapse, which is in stages. It looked like at some point the top of the building would come off, and then maybe the middle of the building, and then maybe there'd be a shell left. And, the way number 7 came down, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, over a period of time.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
What we are looking at is good and evil, right and wrong. A new world order.
Zie je vanaf boven gaan? Nee, je gaat vanaf onder.
Die gaat vanaf onder, ja.
Toch?
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen.
Dit valt anders dan het World Trade Center.
Vind je niet dan?
Ja, je ziet het, de onderste verdiepingen gaan eerst.
Ja, en de rest zakt er gewoon in. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten?
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Dat kan geen waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt.
In het officiële onderzoeksrapport van FEMA staat dat ze niet kunnen verklaren waarom gebouw nummer 7 is ingestort. Uitgebreid bespreken we alle mogelijke oorzaken met Denny Jowenko.
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar ze hebben wel...
Maar hij blijft erbij dat het gebouw is opgeblazen.
Het is vakwerk, zonder meer. We weten heel goed wat ze doen, die jongens.
De vraag is dan, is zoiets van tevoren voorbereid of kan dat op 11 september zelf nog zijn besloten en uitgevoerd?
Met hoeveel man heeft u hoeveel tijd nodig om dat te doen?
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar...
Maakt u een inschatting?
Ja, dan moet je wel ervaren mensen hebben, maar als je een man of 30, 40 zou hebben. Kijk, een paar met de snijbrander, de rest brengt hem aan. Andere mensen sluiten dat deadcord met die boosters aan. Dat moet allemaal precies op hetzelfde moment gaan. En weer een derde die zet de elektronische systemen erop. En dan gaat hij.
Terwijl overal brand was en ook in dat gebouw was brand.
Dat is niet geblust.
Ze hebben de brand niet geblust. Dus de mensen die dat moesten doen, die moesten het doen terwijl het binnen nog brandde.
Ja, dat is vreemd. Dat is vreemd. Dat vind ik ook heel vreemd. Daar heb ik geen verklaring voor.
Liberty. All citywide task force units are to respond to the Liberty and Trinity Place. Advise the message of the plane. Be advised, I'm very hospital on Federal. This is all citywide task force units. Trinity and Liberty will be mobilization point at this time. Transport CO, Central. Who is the authority of? Advise the message about the plane. Central, we need the bomb squad and ESU over King and 9414, hold up. Advise the message about the remote control plane. Station Taurus on the air. Central, I got a message on that plane. It's a big truck with a mural painted of an airplane diving into New York City and exploding. I don't know what's in the truck. The truck is in between 6th and 7th on King Street. Alright, Central, I'll send you in the bus right there for Westgate. With a mural painted airplane diving into New York, blowing up. 2 men got out of the truck, ran away from it. We got those 2 under. Okay, good. You got those? Are you holding those 2 guys, Kate? We got them under. Let's get some units over here. Listen to that. Fucking beat the shit out of them. Alright, you listen, you need any further on those 2 guys over there? You alright over there, Kate? We have both suspects under, Kay. We have the suspects who drove in the van exploded. We have both of them under, Kay. Let's get some help over here. Now, I'm sending you ESU there. I just want to make sure you and your guys are alright over there, Kay. That's all. What's the location, Kay? Put them up. You know, we have both Neotrans driven that exploded. Resurrect? What location? The location, Kay.
Again, our apologies to our viewers about 5 minutes ago, but we do have an established connection now with CNN's Deborah Fayrick. The reports we're getting now, 2 or 3 men arrested on the New Jersey Parkway. Deborah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. That is the information that I am getting from 2 sources, that there was a van either on the New Jersey Turnpike or the Garden State Parkway, and that it was near the George Washington Bridge. There were 2 or 3 men who were in the van. The van was pulled over. It is not clear why the van was pulled over, but when it was, law enforcers found tons of explosives inside of the van. That is right now all I'm hearing, but again, 2 to 3 people in custody, and we are trying to get more information on that right now.
Deborah, I don't mean to put you on the spot here. Do you know where on the Jersey Turnpike this was? How far from New York City?
We do not know that. We are looking into that. There is one report that it was on the New Jersey Turnpike. There is another report that it was very close to the bridge, if not on the bridge. So again, these details all emerging, and we're trying to piece them together. But that's what we've got so far. 2 to 3 people in custody right now, found with a van filled with explosives.
All right, well understood. Deborah, where are you tonight?
And word late tonight that 2 suspects are in FBI custody after a truckload of explosives was discovered around the George Washington Bridge. That bridge links New York to New Jersey over the Hudson River. Whether the discovery of those explosives has anything to do with other events of the day is unclear, but the FBI has 2 suspects in hand, said the truck load of explosives, enough explosives were in the truck to do great damage to the George Washington Bridge. But they arrested the 2 suspects and they're questioning them as we speak.
And all of a sudden, down there, I see this van parked. And I see 3 guys on top of the van. And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
We had received an all-points bulletin, and I just happened to see the van and, you know, hollered over to my lieutenant, you know, I think that could be the van. We checked it out, and it was. You know, we were all on edge, obviously, so I really wasn't looking to make friends with these people, and neither were the officers that I were with. Once we started talking to them, you know, they were pretty much like, hey, you know, we're not against you, we're with you.
And at that point, we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event.
Watching the towers, and though I wasn't the closest, I saw them crumble to the earth like they were full of explosives. And they thought nobody noticed the news report that they did about the bombs planted on the George Washington Bridge. 4 non-Arabs arrested during the emergency, and then it disappeared from the news permanently. They dubbed the tape of Osama, and they said it was proof. Jealous of our freedom, I can't believe you bought that excuse. Rocking a motherfucking flag don't make you a hero. Word to ground zero, the devil crept into heaven. God overslept on the 7th. The new world order was born on September 11th. Father, forgive them, for they don't know right from wrong. The truth is set you free, written down in the song. And the song has the cause of death written in cold. The word of God brought to light that'll save your soul. Save your soul, motherfucker, save your soul. And just so conservatives don't take it to heart, I don't think Bush did it, cause he isn't that smart.
It has been more than 16 years since a civilian working for the Navy was charged with passing secrets to Israel. Jonathan Pollard pled guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage and is serving a life sentence. At first, Israeli leaders claimed Pollard was part of a rogue operation, but later took responsibility for his work. Now, Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S., who may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th. Fox News correspondent Carl Cameron has details in the first of a 4-part series.
Since September 11th, more than 60 Israelis have been arrested or detained, either under the new Patriot anti-terrorism law or for immigration violations. A handful of active Israeli military were among those detained, according to investigators, who say some of the detainees also failed polygraph questions when asked about alleged surveillance activities against and in the United States. There is no indication that the Israelis were involved in the 9/11 attacks, but investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. A highly placed investigator said there are, quote, tie-ins, but when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying, quote, evidence linking these Israelis to 9/11 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It's classified information.
There's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said, wanted, dead or alive. And I don't know where he is. I repeat what I said. I truly am not that concerned about him.
Mr. President, in your speeches now, you rarely talk or mention Osama bin Laden. Why is that? Also, can you tell the American people if you have any more information, if you know if he is dead or alive? Deep in your heart, don't you truly believe that until you find out if he is dead or alive, you won't really eliminate the threat of it?
Well, deep in my heart, I know the man's on the run if he's alive at all. And who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not. We hadn't heard from him in a long time. So I don't know where he is. Nor do I just don't spend that much time on him, really, to be honest with you.
Former President Clinton says that your administration had no meetings on bin Laden for 9 months after he left office. Is that factually accurate, and how do you respond to his charges?
Look, Karen, I've watched all this, finger pointing and namings of names and all that stuff. Our objective is to secure the country. And we've had investigations. We had the 911 Commission. We had to look back this. We've had to look back that. American people need to know that we spent all our time doing everything we can to protect them.
When it comes to Pakistan's efforts to find bin Laden, it seems we should set our expectations even lower. Yeah, that can be hard to do once you consider the U.S. is paying that country about $1 billion a year to hunt him down. Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklashevsky has more tonight on your tax dollars in action.
It sounded like a good idea. Pay the Pakistani military to hunt down al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, hiding in the rugged regions of western Pakistan. But after spending $5 billion over the past 5 years, Osama bin Laden's still on the loose, and the U.S. is left holding the bag.
And the question really is, are they taking the money but not producing the kind of aggressive military operations that are necessary?
I know you said there'll be a time for politics, but you've also said you wanted to change the tone of Washington. Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, it's time for politics. And, it's an absurd insinuation.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
Conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
Locked up indefinitely? No lawyer? No trial? If you think this can't happen to an American citizen, think again.
After 9/11, the Patriot Act has been the centerpiece of the Bush administration's domestic terror fighting efforts, giving the FBI, among others, powers to obtain personal information in terror and spy investigations, things like phone and internet records, without a judge's approval. But an internal Justice Department audit shows FBI agents had improperly, and in some cases illegally, obtained that information. The issue is so-called national security letters. The audit shows some agents got personal data without proper authorization.
Out here in the fields, I fight for my meals. I get my back beat
The investigation intensified in the weeks before 9/11. One Minneapolis agent claimed he was worried Moussaoui might try to fly a hijacked airliner into the World Trade Center. But the Minneapolis investigation was so vigorously blocked that agents joked Osama bin Laden must have a mole at FBI headquarters.
Don't cry, don't raise your eye. It's only teenage wasteland. Sally, take my hand. We'll travel south across land. Put out the fire. Don't look past my shoulder. The exodus is here. The happy ones are here. Let's get together before we get much older. Teenage wasteland. It's only teenage wasteland. Teenage wasteland. Oh yeah. Teenage wasteland. They're all wasted.
Constantly watching the developments in the investigative front, and I can tell you that our national security producer, Chris Plant, is reporting that the Defense Department's investigating the possibility, as hard as this is to believe, that two of the alleged terrorists involved in what happened on Tuesday may have attended schools run by the U.S. military. Now, this is according to a senior defense official.
He claimed he met 3 of the 9/11 hijackers in Shreveport a year before the attacks. This morning, local dentist David Graham is dead after the family says he was poisoned more than 2 years ago. At the time, Graham was trying to publish a manuscript about meeting 3 Middle Easterners in Shreveport. He feared they were plotting to bomb Barksdale. Graham wrote that he warned the FBI. Then after 9/11, he saw their pictures among the hijackers. Before Graham was poisoned, he was supposed to testify at a deportation hearing against a Pakistani man, Jamad Khan, who hosted the men Graham believed to be the hijackers.
Say that a paper passport fell out of one of the towers and was picked up by a police officer on the street. This plane flies into the building, explodes with jet fuel out of the guy's jacket, goes through the fireball, through the side of the plane, out of the burning building, out of the fire shooting out, and comes down to the ground unscathed. But something happened. For 6 months they reported they had this passport. Boy, we've got it, we've got the proof. And then the guy stood up and was alive.
Information culled so far indicates all the alleged hijackers were funded through the same source. But following the money trail will be difficult, especially because the FBI now is not sure all the names on its original hijacker list are correct. Identities may have been stolen. In fact, a list of hijacking suspects sent to banking officials by the FBI suggests one of those identified on an original list, Khalid Al-Midar, may still be alive.
We have several hijackers whose identities were those of the names on the manifests. We have several others that are still in question. So the investigation is ongoing, and I am not certain as to several of the others.
When I first started this effort back in June, when the Full Able Danger story came to my attention, I said it could be anything from gross incompetence to a cover-up bigger than Watergate. I today will tell you, after months of looking at this issue, that there's a cover-up that's taken place and continues to take place, and therefore I'm asking for a criminal investigation as of this date. This whole story is bizarre. This whole story is outrageous, and the truth needs to be told. The reason why the Defense Intelligence Agency is so aggressively after Tony Shaffer is because, in telling the truth, he's going to embarrass bureaucrats within the defense intelligence community. He's going to embarrass politicians in the previous administration and perhaps some in this administration. He's going to lay out a story that will be corroborated by at least 5 others that will detail the fact that the Unit Able Danger identified Muhammad Atta and 3 other terrorists in January of 2000. The story will corroborate that in September of 2000, on 3 separate occasions, attempts were made to transfer information about the Brooklyn cell of Al-Qaeda, including Muhammad Atta and 3 others, to the FBI. On all 3 occasions, lawyers within the Defense Department stopped the meetings from occurring. Now remember, the Congress, in a bipartisan vote, established a commission to get the facts about 9/11. And the facts obviously involved Al-Qaeda and obviously involved Muhammad Atta. In July of 2004, a Navy officer, Annapolis grad, voluntarily goes in to debrief the 9/11 Commission staff, and he mentions that he will swear on his entire life career that he identified Muhammad Atta in January of 2000 and that his team had a chart with Muhammad Atta's name on it and face on it, but also that he saw that chart over and over again. It wasn't a one-time glance. And he also told Dieter Snell that they tried to transfer that information to the FBI. This is Dieter Snell's response, quote, "What do you want us to do with this information? We go to print in 10 days, end quote. Is that what the 9/11 Commission's about? We're going to print in 10 days? And therefore, arguably the most important story relative to the run-up to 9/11 is going to be buried by a staffer who never briefs the 9/11 Commission itself. And I have that verified by 2 of the commissioners, John Lehman and Tim Romer. And for the 9/11 Commission to come out and say that Able Danger, 1, didn't exist, and 2, was historically insignificant is absolutely outrageous.
Our position in this regard is that if America have evidence and proofs, they should produce it, and we are ready for the trial of Osama bin Laden in the light of evidence.
I'd like to start by introducing Donna Marsh O'Connor. Donna is the mother of Vanessa Langer, who died in Tower 2 on the 93rd floor. She comes to us from New York, and please give her a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. This is my motivation. George W. Bush says, God bless America. He already did. Blessed us over and over and over again. And on that day, it was men who cursed us, not God. And it has been in the hands of men ever since to investigate everything. The events leading up to, during, and the events post 9/11. I know on a daily basis the press covers the events post 9/11. But I feel, frankly, abandoned. If I question anything about the official story, I'm called a conspiracy theorist. And all I asked for, when the first news reporter from my local area in upstate New York came to tell me she was going to allow me to tell a beautiful story of my daughter, all I asked that day was, why could I not fly home from Toronto? But Osama bin Laden's family and some Saudi nationals, whose names I still don't know, were flown out of the country in our airspace. I was grounded. They were not.
In just a few moments, the U.S. Pentagon is expected to release the long-awaited videotape that reportedly implicates Osama bin Laden in the September 11th attacks on the U.S. Those who've seen the Arabic language tape say the quality isn't good. Here it is now.
فنستبشر خيرا انك فتحنا على غزه جبل العمليات هذه السنه شوي اخونا ابو الحسن المصري الذي ظهر
I think it's really a poor quality.
You want to play a game now? Okay, here, I help. One of these things is not like the other things. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you guess which thing is not like the other thing? Before I finish my song. Now look closely. Look. Now something here, one of these things does not belong. Now I'll give you a hint. It has to do with how many cookies are on each plate. Okay? You ready? No? Okay, keep looking. I look too. This is hard even for a monster. Keep looking. Oh, did you guess? Oh, yeah? Did you guess which thing is not like the other things? Did you guess with all your might? If you guessed that this thing is not like the other things, you know what? You know what? You're right. Oh, you're absolutely right. You're so smart.
The main stuff, still bust when we ride, still game, still bust anytime. Fuck fans.
game. Still rhyme under pressure, still banging, still prime nigga wetcha, still aiming, still put a fist in the system, still kill a cop, still win, still be the one to expose the beast, when it's still un-American to be for peace. Revenge is a dish best served with steel. If it's on, then let's get it on for real. Can't shut us up, cut us down, never regret. Fuck Bush, I'ma say it loud, raising a fist, we all are freedom, 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 freedom. This is how we ride and roll. Soldier for life for sure. Freedom, 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 freedom. This is how we ride and roll. Soldier for life for sure.
Bobby G'd up, ready to get freed up. Banging on the system, ready to turn the heat up. Malcolm X cocktail, ready to burn the streets up. Holla if you hear me, big homie, it's time to eat something. Picture me rolling, we Paris and Chuck beat up. Dickies and white teed up, throwing them OGs love. Listen up, rule number one is no snitching. Switch up and you gon' have to eat a clip up till you hit club.
Reality is quality, police brutality. How I came into this revolutionary mentality. Coming up in my hood, it's an everyday thing. Niggas is hungry and starving, that's why niggas bang. The OGs put me up on the shoes of the game. Ain't no winds in the street if you coming up lame. That's why I walk how I walk and I claim what I claim. Red, black to the cream with a gangster lean.
Straight G'd up, gorilla funk with the truck and beat up. Throw it up, if you're banging for freedom. And if you're tired of all the talking, let's see something. Get gangster with it, straight G'd up. Gorilla funk with the truck and beat up. Throw it up, if you're banging for freedom. And if you're tired of all the talking, let's see something. Get gangster with it.
Get back, we put it back on the map. With power, about to return the ground. While I'm talking, gorilla funkin'. And now we're back and I'm rapping to back them off again. While I'm spitting, got them tripping, we rush the fake. They keep us living, I keep giving them records to break. They never master me, they never master P. While we blast our ass until we get a piece. Bring it up. Oh, again, I'm in number one. And P-Dog a bus. And God we trust. A Def Jam, without the Def Jam, we rise. To Russian justice, push fires aside. Self-sense is up the fence now. Representing we bow through the crowd. Been around, you can't ignore the sound. We still safe for the puffers of rage.
Straight G'd up, gorilla funk with the truck and beat up. Throw it up if you're banging for freedom. And if you're tired of all the talking, let's see something. Get gangster with it. Straight G'd up, gorilla funk with the truck and beat up. Throw it up if you're banging for freedom. And if you're tired of all the talking, let's see something. Get gangster with it.
That's why we conspire so you never win. Keep it calmer when we ride so you never sin. Niggas in between the eyes so you never min. Feel niggas in the front, be the first to bust. GorillaFunk.com, who you gon' trust? With all this talk about the war, they forgetting us. Broke schools and abuse make the news a must. Holla black, fuck a pig in these killer wars. Around the world, every border it's the same story. Anywhere that is color, it ain't never peace. Africa, South America, and Middle East. Moving backs, bust back at these double foes. Reach first, make the heat spurt so he knows. No blood for the rich, they've been exposed. Now it's power to the people everywhere I go. And everybody saying freedom, 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 freedom. Yeah, my niggas standing right there. Yeah, my niggas standing over here. Yeah, freedom, 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 freedom. Yeah, my niggas standing right there. Yeah, my niggas standing over here. Yeah, freedom, freedom, freedom. Yeah, my niggas standing right there. Yeah, my niggas standing over here. Yeah, freedom, freedom, freedom. Yeah, my niggas standing right there. Yeah, my niggas standing over there. Yes.
Now I'm going to read a quote here from an individual. Some of you may have seen this. It was in one of my publications. And this is a quote from an individual when he was a senator.
Sounds pretty good. Sounds like I don't think many people in here have too much objection with this. He said the Clinton administration would like the federal government to have the capability to read any international domestic computer communications. The FBI wants access to decode, digest, and discuss financial transactions, personal emails, and proprietary information sent abroad, all in the name of national security. The administration's interest in all email is a wholly unhealthy precedent, especially given this administration, Clinton's administration's track record on FBI files and IRS snooping. Every medium by which people communicate can be subject to exploitation by those with illegal intentions. Nevertheless, this is no reason to hand Big Brother the keys to unlock our email diaries, open our ATM records, and read our medical records or translate our international communications. The implications here are far-reaching, with impact that touch individual users, companies, libraries, universities, teachers, and students. Does anybody disagree with that statement? That's a fair warning. That comes from none other than John Ashcroft. But now he's in charge. He has the power, and all of a sudden his attitude is different. He will know how to handle the power and authority much better than the Clinton administration. But maybe Wallace was right. Maybe there's not a dime's worth of difference. It's too bad we can't make him eat these words. That's what he needs to do.
I voted against it. Now, let me tell you why I voted against it. Let me tell you why I voted against it. It was passed in an atmosphere of fear. Members of Congress, they're just like anyone else. They're afraid. But I'll tell you, when you're in a powerful position and you're afraid, that's not good. Because this was, when the Patriot Act was passed, rather than fear, we needed courage to mark the response of our nation to the events of 9/11. But members of Congress, right away, there were extra metal detectors everywhere, and there were soldiers, in combat fatigue, standing outside of those marble buildings. There were sharpshooters on top of the Capitol, barricades put up where there never were barricades before. So all this was playing with people's heads. So they put the Patriot Act in, they brought it in late at night. Most members hadn't even read it. So like a 330-page bill. They brought it in, I think about 2:30 in the morning is when they called the vote. And so most people hadn't read it, and it was called the Patriot Act, and it sounded right. Or even though they hadn't read it, you say Patriot, sounds okay. I'm a Patriot, you're a Patriot, well, okay, we'll vote for it. But they hadn't read it, and if they had read it, they would have seen this. That it gives the government the authority to go into people's homes and download stuff from a computer without even having a warrant. Take it out. It gives the government tremendous power, increased power in wiretaps. It gives the government the ability to go to a librarian and get your reading list, or a video store and see what videos you're watching. And no one, and those clerks can't tell. Government can get health, financial information. And from there, from the Patriot Act, they built other things too. Executive orders. Internment at Guantanamo Bay. Not giving people a chance to be told what they're charged with. People don't have a right to a trial. All these abuses of the criminal justice system that stem from a mentality that it's okay to start to roll back constitutional rights. Now the government's looking at a program called Total Information Awareness, which includes color coding everyone here who would want to travel by air and assigning a different risk factor. What are we doing to ourselves? I mean, we're creating enemies of all of our people. And so I think that, let's step back for a second. When a country's under attack, you don't give up your liberties, you hold on to them. You hold on to them. Because if it is our liberties that are under attack, then we stand up and defend them. But when the government itself is leading the charge to get us to roll back our liberties, You got to raise questions. What's that about? I mean, think for a moment about these color-coded threat systems, kind of Orwellian weather reports.
Today is orange.
What's that about? I mean, what's that? Yeah, they're promoting fear. It's like a drumbeat of fear. And what is it? Why would they do that? It's easy to control people that way. And because let's look, any of us can be fearful. All of us have experienced fear. It's part of being here on the planet. We experience all kinds of emotions. Fear is one of them. But we also know this, that fear has the ability to paralyze us. Fear, anyone of us who's ever experienced fear knows that fear can cause us to do things even against our own interests. Fear can cause us to do things that are counterproductive. Just think of our own relationships and our own lives, how fear is like a poison. That's why 71 years ago, a president of the United States faced a nation that was fearful about whether people were going to have food on the table, clothes on their backs, a roof over their heads. And what did he do? And those are basic fears. And he told the nation, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And he rallied the country. We need to once again challenge this fear and call forth courage from the American people in this time of uncertainty. It's time to call forth courage from America, not to ask our people to be fearful.
We have disrupted an unfolding terrorist plot to attack the United States by exploding a radioactive dirty bomb.
I get a phone call in the car. The prosecutor calls up. He says, your client was taken by the military. And I thought they were joking.
Thank you, but no comment at this time.
Newman's client, Jose Padilla, had been held as a material witness for an entire month before Ashcroft's dramatic announcement. He had been charged with no crime, but was seen as someone who could provide information to a grand jury about 9/11. Suddenly, he was being called a terrorist.
We know that Abdullah al-Mujahir is an al-Qaeda operative.
Broadcasting live from Moscow, Ashcroft announced the arrest as if Padilla had just been caught and a terrorist act narrowly averted.
Be clear, we know from multiple independent and corroborating sources.
Nothing had happened from the time of his arrest 4 weeks before till his designation. And the information that they had was the same. So one has to think, okay, so then what changed?
And I wanted to point out to Director Mueller that
Just prior to Ashcroft's announcement, FBI whistleblower Colleen Rowley had been appearing before Congress. She was testifying about the lack of intelligence sharing between the FBI and CIA and how they'd bungled the warnings that might have prevented 9/11.
we need to streamline the FBI's bureaucracy in order to more effectively combat terrorism.
Let me just start off by saying...
Now Rowley's issues seem passé, as the Justice Department kept emphasizing that interagency collaboration had led to Padilla's capture and the country saved from a terrorist attack.
Was a result of the close cooperative work of FBI agents and CIA agents.
Close cooperation among U.S. government agencies.
But what had all this cooperation yielded?
Within hours, 24 hours, the government then had news conferences in which they backtracked. They said, well, it wasn't really a plot, it was just like in the talking stages.
I want to emphasize again, there was not an actual plan.
There were discussions about this possible plan, and it was in the discussion stage.
It certainly wasn't at the point of having a specific target.
What's remarkable is when you read the government's papers is that they insist that the government does not have to charge Mr. Padilla with a crime.
They don't really have any evidence of any crime. They have a notion that he might have met with people from Al-Qaeda, but they don't think he's a member, and they've said so in court papers.
So what was the sudden urgency? The cynical among us might believe it was to deflect Rowley's damaging information. The government wasn't saying. And with Padilla now locked up in solitary confinement in a naval brig in South Carolina, he wasn't able to explain anything either.
Mr. Padilla was arrested at Chicago O'Hare Airport. He was initially detained under the Material Witness Statute, and only after they could no longer hold him under that statute did they then label him as an enemy combatant.
Padilla's activities and his association with Al-Qaeda make him an enemy combatant.
An enemy combatant? I didn't know, where did you make up that term? You know, I really had never heard of it.
I thought the administration's rules on military tribunals said they would be only for non-American citizens. Is the whole point of holding him as a military combatant to be able to question him without using conventional criminal process?
His status, as the Attorney General said in his statement, is as an enemy combatant. He is being detained under the laws of war as an enemy combatant.
And if the president labels them an enemy combatant, or in President Bush's words, a bad guy, they can be held indefinitely, incommunicado, without a hearing, without charges.
Congress has already ruled on this. Congress said, you can't ever use our military for domestic law enforcement purposes. We don't want you doing that. We don't want you to use the military to arrest citizens. We don't want martial law. And this president and this attorney general says, I don't have to follow the rules.
Does he have legal representation at the moment?
He was being held under the authority of a federal judge, and he had legal representation in connection with that, yes.
Larry, how far did they get?
I called the Department of Defense. I even called the White House. I got the response. He will not be able to call me. I will not be able to call him. I will not be able to visit him. And while, of course, I can write to him, they would not guarantee that he would receive my mail.
Although the government now claims that Padilla may have been involved in a plot to blow up apartment buildings, they have provided no evidence, nor charged him with a crime.
The detention of an American citizen indefinitely without counsel is based not only on hearsay, could be triple hearsay for all we know, but they admit that one of the individuals who gave the information has lied to them in the past, has his own agenda for giving information, and the other informant, in quotes, recanted.
We've never in the history of the United States had investigative detention. We don't do that. You know, except now we do.
Ari Fleischer came out and openly said, yeah, we're issuing these terror alerts for political reasons. And White House memos have gone public. And Republican strategy memos have been made public in the news that they issue terror alerts for political gain. And it's always the same story. We have a specific, credible threat that from Pakistan that they may dirty bomb the stadiums in the next 2 weeks. And then quietly a week later, they say, actually, that was a false threat. The person lied. They don't even give the name. But we're still going to have increased security, and that's back of the paper.
Since last August, there had been a period of calm. The screaming, hair-on-fire pronouncements about terror plots that may have had real plotters but no real conceivable chance of actually happening had ceased. That period spanned the time between the 2006 midterm elections and the week we reached exactly 18 months until the 2008 presidential election. Just a coincidence. Our third story on the countdown, from the mind-bending idea that 4 guys dressed as pizza delivery men were going to outgun all the soldiers at Fort Dix, to the not-too-thought-out plan to blow up JFK Airport by lighting a match 40 miles away. Here we go again. Time for an update of our segment, The Nexus of Politics and Terror. Instances now 13 in number when those two worlds have overlapped, and we are reminded by our government, with or without justification, that we should always fear fear itself. We offer 2 prefaces tonight. One, the words of Dennis Milligan, the new state chairman of the Republican Party in Arkansas, who says about Iraq to the newspaper The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, quote, "At the end of the day, I believe fully the president is doing the right thing, and I think all we need is some attacks on American soil like we had on September 11th, 2001, and the naysayers will come around very quickly to appreciate not only the commitment for President Bush, but the sacrifice that has been made by men and women to protect this country. All we need is some attacks on American soil," said the Republican Party chairman in Arkansas. Arkansas, in the United States. That Arkansas. The other preamble, we remind you again that coincidences can happen, that the logical fallacy insists that just because event A occurs and then event B occurs, that does not automatically mean that event A caused event B. But neither does it say the opposite. The nexus of politics and terror updated through today. Please judge for yourself. Number 1, May 18th, 2002. The first details of the President's daily briefing of August 6, 2001 are revealed, including its title, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. The same day, another memo is discovered, revealing the FBI knew of men with links to Al-Qaeda training at an Arizona flight school. The memo was never acted upon. Questions about 9/11 intelligence failures are swirling. May 20th, 2002.
Terror warnings from the highest levels of the federal government tonight are just
2 days later, FBI Director Mueller declares that another terrorist attack is inevitable.
Tonight, there are even more warnings
The
of
next day,
possible
the Department of Homeland
attacks in
Security
America.
issues warnings of attacks against railroads nationwide and against New York City landmarks like the Brooklyn Bridge and the Statue of Liberty.
That agility that
Number 2,
Dr. Mueller was
Thursday, June 6th, 2002.
I never really anticipated this kind of impact.
Colleen Rowland, the FBI agent who tried to alert her superiors to the specialized flight training taken by Zacarias Moussaoui, whose information suggests the government missed a chance to break up the 9/11 plot, testifies before Congress. Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Graham says Rowley's testimony has inspired similar pre-9/11 whistleblowers. Monday, June 10th, 2002. 4 days later,
We have disrupted an unfolding terrorist plot.
speaking from Russia, Attorney General John Ashcroft reveals that an American named Jose Padilla is under arrest, accused of plotting a radiation bomb attack in this country. In fact, Padilla had by this time already been detained for more than 1 month. Number 3, February 5th, 2003. Secretary of State Powell tells the United Nations Security Council of Iraq's concealment of weapons, including 18 mobile biological weapons laboratories, justifying a UN or U.S. first strike. Many in the UN are doubtful. Months later, much of the information proves untrue. February 7th, 2003. 2 days later, as anti-war demonstrations continue to take place around the globe,
Take some time to prepare for an emergency.
Homeland Security Secretary Ridge cites credible threats by Al-Qaeda and raises the terror alert level to orange. 3 days after that, Fire Administrator David Paulison, who would become the acting head of FEMA after the Hurricane Katrina disaster, advises Americans to stock up on plastic sheeting and duct tape to protect themselves against radiological or biological attack. Number 4, July 23rd, 2003. The White House admits that the CIA, months before the President's State of the Union address, expressed strong doubts about the claim that Iraq had attempted to buy uranium from Niger. On the 24th, the Congressional Report on the 9/11 attacks is issued. It criticizes government at all levels. It reveals an FBI informant had been living with 2 of the future hijackers. It concludes that Iraq had no link to Al-Qaeda. 28 pages of the report are redacted. On the 26th, American troops are accused of beating Iraqi prisoners. July 29th, 2003. 3 days later, amid all of the negative headlines,
Word of a possible new Al-Qaeda attack.
Homeland Security issues warnings of further terrorist attempts to use airplanes for suicide attacks. Number 5, December 17th, 2003. 9/11 Commission co-chair Thomas Kane says the attacks were preventable. The next day, a federal appeals court says the government cannot detain suspected radiation bomber Jose Padilla indefinitely without charges, and the chief U.S. weapons inspector in Iraq, Dr. David Kay, who has previously announced he has found no weapons of mass destruction there, announces he will resign his post. December 21st, 2003. 4 days later, the Sunday before Christmas.
Today, the United States government raised the national threat level.
Homeland Security again raises the threat level to orange. claiming credible intelligence of further plots to crash airliners into U.S. cities. Subsequently, 6 international flights into this country are canceled after some passenger names purportedly produced matches on government no-fly lists. The French later identify those matched names. One belongs to an insurance salesman from Wales, another to an elderly Chinese woman, a third to a 5-year-old boy. Number 6. March 30th, 2004. The new chief weapons inspector in Iraq, Charles Dulfer, tells Congress, "We have still not found any WMD in that country." And after weeks of having refused to appear before the 9/11 Commission, Condoleezza Rice relents and agrees to testify. On the 31st, 4 Blackwater USA contractors working in Iraq are murdered, their mutilated bodies dragged through the streets and left on public display in Fallujah. The role of civilian contractors in Iraq is now widely questioned. April 2nd, 2004.
The FBI has issued a new warning tonight to
Homeland Security issues a bulletin warning that terrorists may try to blow up buses and trains using fertilizer and fuel bombs like the one detonated in Oklahoma City. Bombs stuffed into satchels or duffel bags. Number 7, May 16th, 2004. Secretary of State Powell appears on Meet the Press. Moderator Tim Russert closes by asking him about the enormous personal credibility Powell had placed before the UN in laying out a case against Saddam Hussein. An aide to Powell interrupts the question, saying the interview is over.
I think that was one of your staff, Mr. Secretary. I don't think that's appropriate. Emily, get out of the way.
Powell finishes his answer, admitting that much of the information he had been given about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was
inaccurate and wrong, and in some cases deliberately misleading.
On the 21st, new photos showing mistreatment of Iraqi prisoners at Abu Ghraib prison are released. On the 24th, Associated Press video from Iraq confirms U.S. forces mistakenly bombed a wedding party, killing more than 40. Wednesday, May 26, 2004. 2 days later.
Good afternoon.
Attorney General Ashcroft
Today,
and FBI Director Mueller warned that intelligence from multiple sources
indicates al-Qaeda's specific intention to hit the United States hard.
And that 90% of the arrangements for an attack on the United States were complete. The color-coded warning system is not raised. The Homeland Security Secretary, Tom Ridge, does not attend the announcement. Number 8, July 6, 2004. Democratic presidential candidate John Kerry selects Senator John Edwards as his vice presidential running mate, producing a small bump in the election opinion polls and producing a huge swing in media attention towards the Democratic campaign. July 8, 2004. 2 days later,
credible reporting now indicates that al-Qaeda is moving forward with its plans to carry out a large-scale attack in the United States.
Homeland Secretary Ridge warns of information about al-Qaeda attacks during the summer or autumn. 4 days after that, the head of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, DeForest B. Soares Jr., confirms he has written to Ridge about the prospect of postponing the upcoming presidential election in the event it is interrupted by terrorist acts. Number 9, July 29, 2004. At their party convention in Boston, the Democrats formally nominate John Kerry as their candidate for president. As in the wake of any convention, the Democrats now dominate the media attention over the subsequent weekend. August 1st, 2004. Monday morning, 3 days later.
It is as reliable group of sources that we've ever seen before.
The Department of Homeland Security raises the alert status for financial centers in New York, New Jersey, and Washington to orange. The evidence supporting the warning, reconnaissance data left in a home in Iraq, later proves to be roughly 4 years old and largely out of date. Number 10, October 6, 2005, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The President addresses the National Endowment for Democracy, once again emphasizing the importance of the war on terror and insisting his government has broken up at least 10 terrorist plots since 9/11. At 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 hours after the president's speech has begun, the Associated Press reports that Karl Rove will testify again to the CIA leak grand jury, and that Special Prosecutor Fitzgerald has told Rove he cannot guarantee that he will not be indicted.
We're awaiting a news conference at the bottom of the hour. New York City.
At 5:17 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 hours after the president's speech has begun, New York officials disclose a bomb threat to the city's subway system based on information supplied by the federal government. A Homeland Security spokesman says the intelligence upon which the disclosure is based is of doubtful credibility. And it later proves that New York City had known of the threat for at least 3 days and had increased police presence in the subways long before making the announcement at that particular time. Local New York television station WNBC reports it had the story of the threats days in advance of the announcement, but was asked by high-ranking federal officials in New York and Washington to hold off on its story. Less than 4 days after having revealed the threat, Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York says, "Since the period of the threat now seems to be passing, I think over the immediate future we'll slowly be winding down the enhanced security." While news organizations ranging from the New York Post to NBC News quote sources who say there was reason to believe the informant who triggered the warning simply made it up. A senior U.S. counterterrorism official tells the New York Times, quote, "There was no there. Number 11, a sequence of events in August 2006 best understood now in chronological order. As the month begins, the controversy over domestic surveillance without legal warrants in this country crests. Then on August 9th, the day after the Connecticut Democratic senatorial primary, Vice President Cheney says the victory of challenger Ned Lamont over incumbent Joe Lieberman is a positive for the, quote, Al-Qaeda types, who he says, quote, clearly are betting on the proposition that ultimately they break the will of the American people in terms of our ability to stay in the fight. The next day, British authorities arrest 24 suspects in an alleged imminent plot to blow up U.S.-bound aircraft using liquid explosives smuggled on board in sports drink bottles. Domestic air travel is thrown into chaos as carry-on liquids are suddenly banned. On August 14th, British intelligence reveals it did not think the plot was imminent, only the U.S. did, and our authorities pressed to make the arrests. 11 of the 24 suspects are later released, and in the months to come, the carry-on liquids ban is repeatedly relaxed. Number 12, May 7th, 2007, Greensburg, Kansas, leveled by a tornado, and the state's governor notes more in sorrow than in anger that the redeployment of so much of the Kansas National Guard and its equipment to Iraq might now cripple the soldiers' ability to respond if another disaster hits Kansas.
What we're really missing is equipment, and that is putting a strain on recoveries like this one.
The next day, the authorities announce arrests in a far-fetched plan to attack soldiers at Fort Dix in New Jersey. The so-called terrorists plan to gain access to the base by posing as pizza delivery men. It is not a suicide mission. They state clearly they intend to kill personnel and then retreat to safety, even though they were going to attack a closed compound full of trained soldiers with weapons. And though the plan is branded sophisticated, its perpetrators are not sophisticated enough to have not handed over the videotape of themselves training with weapons to a Circuit City store in order to be transferred to DVD. The Fort Dix plot not only erases from most news coverage the issue of disaster readiness in Kansas, but it also obscures the next day's story that in anticipation of his testimony to a House panel, Attorney General Alberto Gonzales has submitted opening remarks that match, virtually word for word, the remarks he had given the previous month to a Senate committee.
Recognizing my limited involvement in the process, a mistake I freely acknowledge. A mistake that I freely acknowledge. I have soberly questioned my prior decisions.
And number 13, June 2007, the JFK plot to blow up the jet fuel pipeline feeding John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, thus causing the entire airport to be consumed in a horrific conflagration. One of the men arrested has, as a past employee, access to the sprawling complex, but little knowledge of the reality of the pipeline system. The manager of that system tells the New York Times that the pipeline is not some kind of fuse. Shut-off valves throughout would have easily contained any damage, just as a leak in a tunnel in any city would not flood everything in that city below ground. The so-called plot happens to be revealed the day before the second Democratic presidential debate. And as the scandal continues to unfold over the firings of U.S. attorneys and their replacements by political hacks, the so-called plot is announced by the Bush-appointed U.S. attorney for Brooklyn, New York, and by the police chief of New York City, the father of a correspondent for Fox News Channel.
I thought that they were looking at me as I was a terrorist. And I lived in here all my life, was an employee for the city of Chicago for 33 years with the Chicago Fire Department. And looking at me, I don't think I fit the profile of a terrorist. The clerk informed me that they couldn't give me a license. The information they had with other agencies in the government didn't correspond to what I was giving them. It's funny how everybody is concerned about the security of the country, and yet it's like the government threw this big thing onto the shoulders of the state and the cities. And I don't think they're qualified or trained to respond to what the government wants. So I was very aware every day I got into the car that I am, driving on an expired license because I didn't want to be pulled over. I would have to be arrested.
There is also open rebellion over a new law requiring a national driver's license. Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner calls this revolt a threat to national security. He's among our guests here. Stay with us. Intended to help prevent another terrorist attack, introducing a national driver's license. Now, at least 7 states have begun efforts to avoid that law. And joining me now, the author of the Real ID Act, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner. Congressman, good to have you here. What is your reaction to those states who are trying to exempt their residents from the Real ID Act?
Well, they say it's a national driver's license, and it's not.
Right.
It's optional amongst the states. If the states want to have their driver's licenses be valid for federal ID purposes, they've got to do a couple things. One is to make sure that the people they issue those licenses to are legally present in the country. And secondly, they've got to check to make sure that somebody does not have a valid driver's license issued by another state.
Right.
This is not just an anti-terrorism action. We do know that the 9/11 hijackers had multiple driver's licenses from 5 states, but it's public safety as well.
Mandatory federal standards for issuing driver's licenses. The Department of Homeland Security is expected to issue new guidelines this week, and states have just over a year to put them in place. Now, Jean Meserve tells us why states are putting up resistance to the law.
After 9/11, Congress mandated tough new federal standards for driver's licenses called Real ID. States are supposed to implement them in little more than a year. Every one of the 245 million license holders in the United States will have to reapply in person with documents that prove they are citizens or legal residents. The states predict it will swamp motor vehicle offices, creating long waits. Currently, each state issues licenses following their own security standards and with their own features.
They have no business in our state's business, and that's what they're doing.
Arizona State Senator Karen Johnson is sponsoring legislation saying her state will not comply. She says Real ID would invade privacy by creating a large national database of driver information.
I mean, Homeland Security is the one that's going to be running this database. Give me a break.
Arizona is one of 24 states that has passed or proposed legislation opposing Real ID. The big complaint, the cost, an estimated $11 billion over 5 years. The biggest expense is likely to be a requirement that states verify the authenticity of identity documents used to get a license.
It's verification that not even the federal government can complete for its own employees.
Bobby Marshall just got his license renewed in Phoenix in 20 minutes. If Real ID lengthens his wait, it's fine with him.
I don't think everybody should just automatically get a driver's license. If it takes a day of your time, that's what it takes.
Homeland Security is taking an even harder line.
If we don't get it done now, someone's going to be sitting around in 3 or 4 years explaining to the next 9/11 Commission why we didn't do it.
Because the next person who tries to get a driver's license may want to do harm to the country.
Rudy Giuliani had a line last night that I'm not sure many people noticed, but it had to do with a national ID card. It was within the context of a debate about immigration, and he said we need a tamper-proof ID card and a database that figures out who they are, immigrants, why they're here, and whether or not they're legal. That's a national ID card. Are you for that?
Absolutely not. I voted against the Real ID. I think the Real ID is the national ID card. It's essentially going to be introducing the notion that we will be carrying our papers. You can't do that, gather that much information in an ID card for illegal aliens or Hispanics and not include everybody. It just doesn't make any sense. So the age of carrying our papers and national IDs, it's here, and I am concerned about that. It's all done in the name of safety. Everybody's frightened to death, and if you don't sacrifice your liberties, you can't be safe. And yet the dangers exist, but they're not quite bad enough, and they never should be bad enough to sacrifice liberty. There's no reason to sacrifice liberty in thinking that you're going to be safer.
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I've been around for a long, long year. Stole many a man's soul and faith. Pleased to meet you. Hope you get my name. Oh yeah. But what's puzzling you? The nature of my name. Ah, yeah. Get down in it.
Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction, continuing ties to terrorist organizations,
secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists.
The danger to our country is great.
Or help them develop their own.
The danger to our country is growing. The Iraqi regime possesses biological and chemical weapons. The Iraqi regime could launch a biological or chemical attack in as little as 45 minutes.
If someone is waiting for a so-called smoking gun, it's certain that we will have waited too long.
We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
The danger to our country is growing.
We found a weapon for mass destruction. We found biological laboratories.
Everybody knows that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
I have every reason to believe that the intelligence that we were operating off was correct. No question we have said that Saddam Hussein possesses biological and chemical weapons. The smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud. But on the specific issue of weapons of mass destruction, it's going to take time, and we're going to have to be patient.
Over time, the truth will come out.
Now, it's going to take time to find anything because they've had...
People will find that we presented a solid case, a case that is there and was there and will remain there.
So it's going to take a period of time to find the people. I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
I believe that we will find the truth, and the truth is he was developing a program for weapons of mass destruction.
I think what will happen is we'll discover people who will tell us where to go find it.
You're not going to find it simply in a house-to-house search. You're going to find it when people start to talk to you.
It is not like a treasure hunt where you just run around looking everywhere hoping you find something. I just don't think that's going to happen. Inspectors didn't find anything, and I doubt that we will.
Are people going to find out the truth? And the truth will say that this intelligence is good intelligence, no doubt in my mind.
What we will do is find the people who will tell us. There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it, and that's just a fact.
Is U.S. credibility on the line over weapons of mass destruction in Iraq?
I'm not exactly sure what that means. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Maybe under here. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here. Maybe under here. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Maybe under here. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here. Maybe under here. Maybe under here. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Maybe under here.
Well, let me just ask you this. If they did not have these weapons of mass destruction, though, granted, all of that is true, why then did they pose an immediate threat to us, to this country?
You and a few other critics are the only people I've heard use the phrase immediate threat. I didn't. The president didn't. And it's become kind of folklore that that's what's happened. The president went...
You're saying that nobody in the administration said that?
I can't speak for nobody and everybody in the administration and say nobody said
that. The Vice President didn't say that?
If you have any citations, I'd like to see them.
We have one here. It says, some have argued that this is you speaking, some have argued that the nuclear threat from Iraq is not imminent, that Saddam is at least 5 to 7 years away from having nuclear weapons. I would not be so certain.
And
close to imminent.
Well, I've tried to be precise and I've tried to be accurate.
No terrorist state poses a greater or more immediate threat to the security of our people and the stability of the world than the regime of Saddam Hussein in Iraq.
If you really want to know the truth about the state of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction before the invasion, listen to Colin Powell in February 2001. He states clearly that there was no threat from Saddam Hussein.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
And this is Condoleezza Rice, Bush's national security advisor, in July of the same year, saying the same thing, putting the lie to their own propaganda.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
And that, many believe, was the truth, a truth that was covered up and conveniently forgotten after September the 11th, when Bush and Blair decided to attack Iraq.
I'm Ray McGovern, a 27-year veteran of the Central Intelligence Agency and co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. I would like to compliment you on your observation that lies are fundamentally destructive of the trust that government needs to govern. A colleague of mine, Paul Pillar, who is the top agency analyst on the Middle East and on counterterrorism, accused you and your colleagues of an organized campaign of manipulation. Quote, I suppose by some definitions
Could you get to your question,
that'd be
please?
called a lie. Atlanta, September 27, 2002, Donald Rumsfeld said, and I quote, there is bulletproof evidence of links between Al-Qaeda and the government of President Saddam Hussein. Was that a lie, Mr. Rumsfeld, or was that manufactured somewhere else? Because all of my CIA colleagues disputed that, and so did the 9/11 Commission. And so I would like to ask you to be upfront with the American people. Why did you lie to get us into a war that was not necessary and that has caused these kinds of casualties? Why?
Well, first of all, I haven't lied. I did not lie then. Colin Powell didn't lie. He spent weeks and weeks with the Central Intelligence Agency people and prepared a presentation that I know he believed was accurate. And he presented that to the United Nations. The President spent weeks and weeks with the Central Intelligence people. And he went to the American people and made a presentation. I'm not in the intelligence business. They gave the world their honest opinion. It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not. I said I knew where suspect sites were, and we were just...
You said you knew where they were, near Tikrit, near Baghdad, and north, east, south, and west of there. Those are your words.
My words were that... No, wait a minute, let him stay 1 second. Just a second.
Just a second, indeed. Rumsfeld's words about WMD, March 30th, 2003, on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, were, quote, we know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
This is America, huh?
Yeah. Go ahead. You're getting plenty of play, sir.
I'd just like an honest answer.
I'm giving it to you.
We're talking about lies, and your allegation that there was bulletproof evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq.
Did Rumsfeld make that allegation? Indeed, he did. September 27, 2002, to the Chamber of Commerce, right there in Atlanta, quoting, we ended up with 5 or 6 sentences that were bulletproof. We could say them, they're factual, they're exactly accurate. They demonstrate that there are, in fact, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. But they're not photographs, they're not beyond a reasonable doubt. Still, Mr. Rumsfeld again had to face his own words quoted back to him. How to do that? Change the subject.
Was that a lie? Or you misled?
Zarqawi was in Baghdad during the pre-war period. That is a fact.
Zarqawi? He was in the north of Iraq in a place where Saddam Hussein had no rule. That's where he was.
He was also in Baghdad.
Yeah, when he needed to go to the hospital. Come on, these people aren't idiots. They know the story.
You are... Let me give you an example. It's easy for you to make a charge, but why do you think that the men and women in uniform, every day when they came out of Kuwait and went into Iraq, put on chemical weapon protective suits? Because they liked the style? They honestly believed that there were chemical weapons. Saddam Hussein had used chemical weapons on his own people previously. He'd used them on his neighbor, the Iranians, and they believed he had those weapons. We believed he had those weapons.
That's what we call a non sequitur. It doesn't matter what the troops believe. It matters what you believe.
I think, Mr. Secretary, the debate is over. We have other questions. Courtesy to the audience.
Dr. Doug Rockey is a U.S. Army Health Physicist and Nuclear Medical Sciences Officer. Dr. Rockey has expertise in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare operations, microwave radiation, emergency response, decontamination, and battlefield cleanup.
We were the super garbage men. We had to clean up the messes. We had to identify the messes. We had to collect all the garbage. We had to provide the on-site medical care. It's a lot. All the Iraqi equipment, a lot of U.S. equipment, contains radiological components. When that equipment was blowing up, the radiological materials were released into the environment, exposing and contaminating. And then to top it all off, we used uranium munitions, known as depleted uranium. They've been used back in 1973 by the Israelis against the Egyptians, but during Gulf War I, Desert Shield and Desert Storm, we took it to a totally new level. The use of radioactive materials on the battlefield. Deliberately taken tons and tons, actually over 350 tons of solid radioactive materials, and dispersed it across Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Taking our radioactive waste and throw it in somebody else's backyard. This is an aluminum model of one DU tank route. This route would be fired by an Abrams tank. If it was actually uranium rather than aluminum, it would be over 10 pounds of solid uranium. What happens, it moves extremely high velocity. The minute it leaves the bore of the gun, it catches fire. So this rod is a burning rod of uranium. It impacts tremendous forces, unbelievable forces, over this very small diameter. And it's like a blowtorch with tremendous forces that punches right through. Now, as this breaks through and goes into anything, it can be steel, concrete, sandbag bunkers, wood, or anything. Uranium itself is soft. So you have parts of the fragments of uranium breaks off as it enters and goes through. The uranium rod emits alpha, beta, and gamma radiation and X-ray radiation. The alpha particle is a 4.15 MeV particle. That's 4.15 million electron volts. Now, the intercellular voltage, the voltage that your cell operates biologically, is 10 electron volts. So when that cell is bombarded by an alpha particle at 4.5 million electron volts, it doesn't have a good day. We have all kinds of other problems. We have the beta particle and the gamma rays, the X-rays. Now, we've actually measured the ionizing radiation emissions from a DU rod within, say, 4 to 6 inches at over 300 millirems per hour. Now, that radiation is continuous. So you get a fragment of DU into your body that's emitting at over 300 millirems per hour. Or if you're holding the rod in your hand, it's over 300 millirems per hour. And if you got the fragment, then you got the alpha particle in there, which is an extremely hot particle, 4.15 MeV. And we're looking at what we measured over 10,000 counts per minute, 10,000 disintegrations per minute, 10,000 alpha particles per minute. In fact, in May of 2002, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs reported that over 160,000 troops that participated in Gulf War I, the period August of 1990 through the fall of 1991, basically October and November 1991, have been classified as disabled from anywhere from 10 to 100%. Now, my own disability didn't come about until after May of 2002. The count right now is somewhere close to 200,000. When we look at all the troops that have gone into the Persian Gulf region between August of 1990 and May of 2002, when the last formal report was written, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs formally acknowledges over 221,000 individuals are labeled as permanently disabled, and over 10,000 are deceased that had service connection disabilities. There's a big difference. There's a 60,000 increase in individuals that are disabled amongst those that served after the fall of 1991. that disability is only due to residual exposures and immunizations that were continued to be given, because there was no active combat. There was no active maneuvering. So what's happened? Well, what happened prior to Gulf War I is pre-deployment health physical assessments were not given. And at the completion of Gulf War I, post-deployment health physical assessments were not given, even though we specifically requested it. In my own case, when I came back to get released after completing special projects, I said I was exposed to these. We need to do these tests. And they refused to do them.
The history of depleted uranium goes back to a 1943 declassified memo known as the Groves Memorandum. In this memo, depleted uranium is recommended for development as a poison gas warfare weapon.
Specialist Gerard Matthew cleaned up vehicles hit by DU during his 5 months in Iraq in 2003. He says breathing in depleted uranium dust made him sick.
I came back with chronic migraines, swelling in my face, and vision problems.
Matthew also says his 2.5-year-old daughter's birth defect is a direct result of his DU exposure. He and 7 other vets are suing the Army over depleted uranium. The U.S. Army insists its own testing of Iraq veterans shows no direct link between DU and illness or birth defects in humans.
We weren't able to see anything of this mass killing. The information coming out of Fallujah is dangerous. The few who tried to show it know something about that. Iraqi police arrested 2 journalists from Al Arabiya last March, and their video cassettes were confiscated. The freelance journalist Enzo Baldoni, who was killed in Iraq, was working on Fallujah in the last few weeks, just like the Manifesto journalist Giuliana Sgrena, who was kidnapped carrying out an inquiry into the refugees of the city. A suspicion arises as to whether the story of exporting democracy to Fallujah was meant to be told or not. Did you gather any particular information about Fallujah?
Ma su Fallujah, non solo su Fallujah, stando lì avevo avuto...
Not only in Fallujah, I had heard stories from the inhabitants about the use of certain weapons, like napalm, in Baghdad during the battle at the airport in April 2003. And then I had collected, just before going to interview the city refugees, testimonies from other inhabitants of Fallujah about the use of guns on white phosphorus. In particular, some women had tried to enter their homes and they had found a certain dust spread all over the house. The Americans themselves had told them to clean their houses with detergents because that dust was very dangerous. In fact, they had some effects on their bodies, bleedings and very strange things. I would have liked to interview those persons, but unfortunately my kidnappers, who said to be part of Fallujah's resistance, have forbidden me to tell what I have known about Fallujah by kidnapping me. This war cannot have witnesses. It cannot have witnesses because it's based on lies. The Americans have permitted only to embedded journalists to go to Fallujah. Despite that, for example, the image of the Marine that shoots the wounded and unarmed warrior inside the Fallujah mosque has gone out. But exactly because this image has gone out, we do not know how, and because it has circulated all over the world, the NBC journalist that has recorded it has been immediately expelled from the embedded body.
The destruction detailed in a report for the UN's office in Iraq, the UNAMI, dated January 2005, which was for a time kept secret, is described as shocking. Around 37,000 houses are destroyed. The Americans mark with a red cross the cleaned out or disinfected houses, as they write in their reports. As for the death toll, there are still no official figures. I can honestly say that I'm not aware of any civilian casualty, said US General John Sattler on the 18th of November. These images, shot over the days following the attack, seem to disprove his theory. The civilian victims were in the hundreds. It is certainly not easy to live in this area if even those waving white flags as a sign of surrender are still shot at. Some manage to escape and others no.
Al-Ghazali reported that he had seen 3 passengers in a car, all dead, with their faces and teeth burnt, the body intact, and no sign of projectiles.
There wasn't any bullet. I saw the teeth, just the teeth, and no eyes. All of them, with the body, nothing for the bodies. Just the teeth and all the, the heads were burned.
There were other inexplicable aspects. The terrain where the battle took place was dug up by the American military and replaced with other fresh earth. The bodies that were not hit by projectiles had shrunk to just slightly more than 1 meter in height.
Except that the bodies is killed by the bullets. Most of them that become very small. It's like that, something like that.
26 in the past. About 20 of them, some of them have no head. The head being cut. Some of them, the arms, the legs. The only one who didn't injure was the driver. And really, I don't know how he reached our hospital. Because one hand, one arm was in his lap. One head beside him. It was a very, very strange, horrible thing. In the roof of the car, there was part of the body, some intestine, brains.
Yes, all parts of the body.
It was miserable. Very, 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 very.
Do you have idea with what kind of weapons they attacked that bus?
This because we didn't know what kind of weapon would be hit. Really, what we saw, cut arms, cut legs, cut head, abdomen, open abdomen, viscera outside.
It seems to be a new weapon.
It seems a new weapon.
They try to do experiments on our civilians.
We don't know what was.
Nobody can identify what the type of this was.
In this past, was very crowded. They went from Hilla to Kifl to see their families. But before they reached the checkpoint of American checkpoint, they returned back. They said to them, please return the villagers. They said to them, return back, return back. When he tried to return back, they shoot him from the checkpoint.
No gunshot wounds.
No. I don't know what it was. We are here 10 surgeons. We couldn't decide what was the weapon which been hit this time.
Can I ask you a question about some of the technology that you're developing to fight the war on terror, specifically directed energy and high-powered microwave technology? When do you envision that you can weaponize that type of technology?
Goodness. It is in, for the most part, the kinds of things you're talking about are in varying early stages. Do you want to give anything you'd add?
I don't think I would add much. I think they are in early stages and probably not ready for employment at this point.
In the normal order of things, when you invest in research and development and begin a developmental project, you don't have any intention or expectations that one would use it. On the other hand, the real world intervenes from time to time, and you reach in there and take something out that is still in a developmental stage, and you might use it.
In this conflict, I think General Franks has been very open to looking at new things if there are new things available, and has been willing to put them into the fight even before they've been fully wrung out. And I think that's not referring to these two particular cases of directed energy or high-powered microwave, but sure.
Dr. Mohammed Hadid and his team were given US authorization to enter Fallujah with the unenviable task of identifying and burying the dead. The bodies of the civilian casualties of women still clutching the Misbaba, the Islamic rosary, their bodies showing strange injuries, some burned to the bone, others with skin hanging from their flesh.
Part of the reason we went into Iraq was the main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't, but he had the capacity to make weapons of mass destruction. But I also talked about the human suffering in Iraq.
Tonight, Ali Shalal Kaisi tells of his humiliation at the hands of American soldiers. Our Middle East correspondent Julian Mannion travelled to Jordan to meet him and to hear about the terrifying chain of events that saw him transformed from a local mayor to a victim of torture. His report contains disturbing images.
It was the image that horrified the world. A hooded Iraqi prisoner forced to stand on a box with electrodes attached to the fingers of his outstretched hands. That man was Ali Shalal Kaisi, now free in Amman, Jordan. In his dingy flat, Ali relived with me his terrible days at Abu Ghraib prison. His story is harrowing. The American guards, he says, tried to break him with exhaustion and electric shocks.
They made me stand like that for hours until my arms got tired, and then they would electrocute me. I felt my eyes popping out, and once I bit my tongue and blood started coming out of my mouth.
It's the deformed left hand that confirms that Ali was the prisoner on the box. The original damage was from a previous injury, but according to Ali, the wound became infected after an American soldier deliberately stamped on it. In the hell of Abu Ghraib, prisoners were routinely humiliated and abused, while sadistic guards took pictures. The images stir Ali's memories. He says that this female guard, called Sabrina,
told him that she was under orders to make the prisoners' lives hell. This prisoner, he says, was a student from the Yemen, held for months until he could prove his innocence. At the time of his arrest, Ali was the mayor of a small village near Baghdad. The best evidence that he was not a terrorist is that he was released after 6 months. Now he is working with American human rights lawyers to sue 2 US companies involved with Abu Ghraib. For the lawyers, Ali is a symbol.
He's become iconic for the shame that the United States has in front of the world, and in particular in front of the Muslim world.
Ali Shalal Kaisi is now touring the Arab countries with his story. He's trying to raise public consciousness of what happened to the prisoners in Abu Ghraib.
My name is Ken Tillman. 2 days ago marked the 3rd anniversary of the death of my older brother Pat Tillman, Spear, Afghanistan. To our family and friends, it was a devastating loss. To the nation, it was a moment of disorientation. To the military, it was a nightmare. But to others within the government, it appears to have been an opportunity. April of 2004 was turning into the deadliest month to date in the war in Iraq. The dual rebellions in Najaf and Fallujah handed the U.S. forces their first tactical defeat, as American commanders essentially surrendered Fallujah to members of Iraq resistance, and the administration was forced to accede to Ayatollah Sistani's demand for January elections in exchange for assistance in extricating U.S. forces from its battle with the Mahdi militia. A call-up of 20,000 additional troops was ordered, and another 20,000 troops had their tours of duty extended. In the midst of this, the White House learned that Christian Parente, Seymour Hersh, and other journalists were about to reveal a shocking scandal involving massive and systemic detainee abuse in a facility known as Abu Ghraib. Then on April 22nd, 2004, my brother Pat was killed in a firefight in eastern Afghanistan. Immediately after Pat's death, our family was told that he was shot in the head by the enemy in a fierce firefight outside a narrow canyon. In the days leading up to Pat's memorial service, media accounts based on information provided by the Army and the White House were wreathed in a patriotic glow and became more dramatic in tone. A terrible tragedy that might have further undermined support for the war in Iraq was transformed into an inspirational message that served instead to support the nation's foreign policy wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. To further exceed Pat's death, he was awarded the Silver Star for valor. The abridged version went like this: only after his team engaged this well-armed enemy did it appear that the enemy's volume of fire into the kill zone diminished. Above the din of battle, Corporal Tillman was heard issuing fire commands to take the fight to an enemy on the dominating high ground. Always leading from the front, Corporal Tillman aggressively maneuvered his team against the enemy position on the steep slope. As a result of Corporal Tillman's effort and heroic action, the trail element of the platoon was able to maneuver through the ambush position of relative safety without suffering a single casualty. And the fight that ensued at Corporal Tillman's position increased in intensity. Corporal Tillman focused all his efforts on keeping the men of his team safe while continuing to press the attack himself without regard for his own personal safety. In the face of mortal danger, Corporal Tillman illustrated that he would not fail his comrades. His actions are in keeping with the highest standards of the United States Army. This was a narrative that inspired countless Americans as intended. There was one small problem with the narrative, however. It was utter fiction. The content of the multiple investigations reveal a series of contradictions that strongly suggest deliberate and careful misrepresentations. We appeal to this committee because we believe this narrative was intended to deceive the family, but more importantly, to deceive the American public. Pat's death was clearly the result of fratricide. It was due to a series of careless actions by several individuals in our own platoon after a small harassing ambush. During this uncontrolled shooting, The driver of the vehicle himself recognized friendlies immediately, but kept driving for approximately 400 meters while the soldiers in the back of his truck continued to shoot at the hillside where the U.S. soldiers were and civilians. The vehicle saw arms and hands waving. Smoke was flying, pin gun flares. An Afghan soldier was immediately recognized. They never felt threatened, and they still shot up the village unprovoked. And the vehicle behind them clearly saw the U.S. soldiers on the hillside and were calling ceasefire. The end results were the death of Pat and the Afghan soldier, as well as 2 more soldiers wounded in the village. The signs were available, but the decision to shoot was made. This was not some fog of war. They simply lost control. According to the sworn statement on April 26th by the fellow soldier who was right next to Pat, literally right next to Pat. Thank you, sir. Quote, I remember watching the friendlies just shooting at us. A 50 cal rolled up into our sights and started to unload on top of us. They would work in bursts, 50 cal for 10 to 15 seconds, 240 Bravo 10 to 15 seconds, back and forth. Specialist Tillman and I were yelling, stop, friendlies, cease fire. But they could not hear us. Tillman came up with the idea to let a smoke grenade go. This stopped the friendly contact for a few moments, and that's when I realized the AMF soldier was dead. At this time, the GMV rolled into a better position to fire on us. We thought the battle was over, though, so we were relieved, getting up, stretching out, and talking with one another. When I heard some 5.5 sounds coming from the GMV, they started firing again. That's when I hit the deck. Specialist Tillman, at this time, was hit by small arms fire. I know this because I could hear the pain in his voice as he called out, ceasefire, friendlies, I am Pat effing Tillman, damn it. He said this over and over again until he stopped, end quote.
First thing this morning, the president signed into law the Military Commissions Act of 2006, which does away with habeas corpus, the right of suspected terrorists or anybody else to know why they have been imprisoned, provided the president does not think it should apply to you and declares you an enemy combatant. Further, the bill allows the CIA to continue using interrogation techniques so long as they do not cause what is deemed, quote, serious physical or mental pain. And it lets the president to ostensibly pick and choose which parts of the Geneva Convention to obey. We have lived as if in a trance. We have lived as people in fear. And now, our rights and our freedoms in peril, we slowly awaken to learn that we have been afraid of the wrong thing. Therefore, tonight have we truly become the inheritors of our American legacy. For on this first full day that the Military Commissions Act is in force, we now face what our ancestors faced at other times of exaggerated crisis and melodramatic fear-mongering, a government more dangerous to our liberty than is the enemy it claims to protect us from. We have been here before, and we have been here before, led here by men better and wiser and nobler than George W. Bush. We have been here when President John Adams insisted that the Alien and Sedition Acts were necessary to save American lives, only to watch him use those acts to jail newspaper editors, American newspaper editors, in American jails for things they wrote about America. We have been here when President Woodrow Wilson insisted that the Espionage Act was necessary to save American lives, only to watch him use that act to prosecute 2,000 Americans, especially those he disparaged as hyphenated Americans, most of whom were guilty only of advocating peace in a time of war. American public speakers in American jails for things they said about America. And we have been here when President Franklin D. Roosevelt insisted that Executive Order 9066 was necessary to save American lives, only to watch him use that order to imprison and pauperize 110,000 Americans, while his man in charge, General DeWitt, told Congress, it makes no difference whether he is an American citizen, he is still a Japanese. American citizens in American camps for something they neither wrote nor said nor did, but for the choices they or their ancestors had made about coming to America. Each of these actions was undertaken for the most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. And each was a betrayal of that for which the president who advocated them claimed to be fighting. Adams and his party were swept from office and the Alien and Sedition Acts erased. Many of the very people Wilson silenced survived him, and one of them even ran to succeed him and got 900,000 votes, though his presidential campaign was conducted entirely from his jail cell. And Roosevelt's internment of the Japanese was not merely the worst blight on his record, but 4 decades later it would necessitate a formal apology from the government of the United States to the citizens of the United States whose lives it ruined. The most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. In times of fright, we have been only human. We have let Roosevelt's fear of fear itself overtake us. We have listened to the little voice inside that has said, the wolf is at the door. This will be temporary. This will be precise. This too shall pass. We have accepted that the only way to stop the terrorists is to let the government become just a little bit like the terrorists. Just the way we once accepted that the only way to stop the Soviets was to let the government become just a little bit like the Soviets. Or substitute the Japanese, or the Germans, or the socialists, or the anarchists, or the immigrants, or the British, or the aliens. The most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. And always, always wrong.
When Mexican President Vicente Fox leaves office this week and Felipe Calderón takes his place, President Bush will be the last of the so-called three amigos. Bush, Fox, and of course Canadian Prime Minister Paul Martin were the originators of the so-called Security and Prosperity Partnership, which critics call nothing more than a North American Union. It means open borders, commerce at all cost, and by the way, without the approval of either American voters or the U.S. Congress. Tonight, a proposal for an expanded so-called free trade zone from Alaska to the tip of South America. It's a plan from the business elites, the political elites, that will cost more American jobs, cost American sovereignty, but it would fulfill the president's father's vision. Bill Tucker reports.
It's not a new idea. President Bush talked about it back in 1991.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause.
Now, former United States Trade Ambassador Robert Zoellick is talking about it again with renewed vigor. This time, a new world order with business at the helm of trade and economic policy, advocating what he calls the Association of American Free Trade Agreements, a separate non-government entity which would include North, Central, and South America.
What Zoellick is really proposing here is a stealth trade agenda. It's not a national agenda. He's proposing to set up what's essentially a private organization to try to achieve what he couldn't get done when he was the U.S. trade representative. And this is a business agenda.
It's an agenda that goes hand in hand with the United States, Mexico, and Canada, working quietly and behind the scenes to promote a common market with common deregulation for the benefit of multinational corporations. It's an agenda that so far has resulted in an increase in U.S. corporate profits of 45%, while wages of American workers have risen only 3% in the last 5 years.
The main danger raised by Zoellick's proposals is that the future of American international economic policy, which affects not only our nation's prosperity, but its national security, will be set not by the American people and their elected representatives, but by a small corporate elite that is accountable to no one but itself.
Effectively surrendering the sovereignty of the United States.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
Conspiracy theories. 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 Conspiracy theories.
There's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, the wealthy, the real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big all the big media companies. So they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long, where they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. Yeah. You know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Yo, I heard it said the revolution won't be televised, but in the land of milk and honey, there's a date you gotta sell it by. Otherwise, it just expires and spoils. And these folks jump out the pot when the water too hot, cause the fire boils inside. You go to church to find you some religion, and all you hear is conniving and gossip and contradiction. And you try to vote and participate in the government, and the motherfucking Democrats